Rogue Knight by Illuviar. 41. Chapter 16, Part 5. And this was baited by Gatemaster on the Space Battles forums. Thank you for the splendid work. Disclaimer, I do not own Gundam Seed or Star Wars. They belong to their respective copyright owners. This story is not created with commercial aim. I make no money from it. Phase 16, The Future of the Order, =RK=, Part 5, Medical Center Jedi, Temple Coruscant. I looked at Piet with incredulous expression on my face. Ensign, remind me to have whoever is responsible for the Republic's counterintelligence efforts in general shot for incompetence. Sir? Asked the poor junior officer. It was evident that my words made him uneasy. Despite how we'll be spinning this mess for the public, we got criffed, again, I deadpanned. Grievous, or what's left from that imbecile, gone. What we presume to be CIS agents managed to get their hands on at least a few holocrons, the Army and Navy's comm codes and partial force dispositions, and almost blew up a big part of Coruscant, including the Senate and the Jedi Temple. Firmus cringed. Yes, sir, you are correct. At least you stopped that bomb. He tried to cheer me up, and I ended in the damn hospital. Ahem. An elderly female Jedi glared daggers at me. Master Alendra Jalind was the temple's chief medic, and for some reason scared the crap out of me. There was something in the way she sweetly smiled at me when I tried to release myself an hour ago, long before the battery of tests she wanted to run on me was complete, that chilled the blood in my veins. Yeah, she didn't want loud voices or curses in her domain. Did I mention that I'm scared from doctors? It had something to do with my experience with them as a Sith and in what happened to me in my previous transdimensional adventure. Even HK-117 had decided to wait outside. I still hadn't made my mind whether he was apprehensive of her or simply enjoyed my suffering. She who must not be named, or irritated for that matter, glanced at me as if she knew I was thinking about her. I gave her a nervous smile and returned my attention to Piet, wondering if my skittishness was because the head Jedi doctor was a good friend of Shak Tai, who was really pissed off at me at the moment. All thanks to HK's oversized mouth. Did I miss something else important? I asked. Commander Tano apprehended a shapeshifter masking as a Jedi Master. The infiltrator gave us some information in exchange for more lenient treatment. Apparently the holocrons were stolen because they are the only way to read a crystal containing the names of all Force-sensitive children across the galaxy of whom the Jedi Order is aware. I stared at Piet for at least a minute before my faculties returned and I was able to restart my brain. I snapped my hanging jaw shut and grinned. This was an excellent opportunity. I needed to get my hands on that info and send it to my Black Ops detachment. What are the Jedi doing in order to retrieve the information? They sent Generals Kenobi, Skywalker, and Shak Ti to retrieve the crystal and the Jedi Master in whose possession it was. Well, given the gravity of the situation, we should help our Jedi friends. After all, we can't leave them hanging in their hour of need, I said sincerely. Naturally, by helping them, I meant rescuing as many of those kids as possible from Jedi indoctrination. But no one here needed to know that. I tried to get up again and winced. The Nexus bomb's dimension rift had made a number on me. I was barely able to stand up, and my connection with the Force was shaky. It would be some time before I was up for my usual tricks. General Vale, snapped the voice of Master Alendra Jolind. This was going to be a long day. =RK=, Council Chambers Jedi, Temple Coruscant. When I was finally released from the hospital, I made my way to meet Masters Yoda and Sakura, who wanted to know how the hell their nice temple almost got blown up. That was going to be entertaining conversation. I was escorted to the council chambers by my bodyguards, who weren't particularly thrilled at me. After all, I had left them to guard the temple's security center instead of taking them with me when I went to chase intruders and disarming WMDs. For some reason, they were more peeved because they missed the part with the big-ass bomb than anything else. Needless to say, HK-117 was walking a step behind me the whole way. I didn't miss the suspicious looks exchanged between him and the clones who were supposed to keep me in one piece. Master, is this really necessary? Asked an exasperated HK. Those meatbags can't protect you. Look at them. They don't even have half-decent armor and heavy weapons. No proper Force adepts as minions. Not even an angry Wookiee tagging along, whined the droid. More than a few of the clone troopers growled at HK, who somehow managed to look smug. Chill, HK. I know that the GAR's standard equipment is trash. I hope that we'll have a much better kit before our next major deployment. That is the understatement of the week, declared the droid. I shook my head at his antics. At least he had stopped riling up the Jedi after royally pissing off Shakti, which reminded me. I needed to find a way to make up to her for HK's insinuations before she decided to gut me on general principle alone. When we reached the council chambers, I left my guards behind and entered accompanied only by HK 117, which I hoped wouldn't turn out to be a mistake. Inside, I found Yoda and Sakura waiting for us in person, with Masters Plo Koon, Kenobi, and most importantly, Shakti, present via the holonetwork. Anakin, being a wet behind-the-ears Jedi Knight, was excluded from this meeting. I nodded at the Jedi and smiled nervously at Shakti. Her glare promised retribution. Our byplay wasn't missed by Yoda, whose ears twitched in amusement or irritation. I honestly couldn't tell. General Vale, we would like an explanation about the events that occurred under our feet yesterday. Master Sakura started the Inquisition. I shrugged and gave them my account of the events. They were silent for a few moments while shooting each other pointed looks. Del-Katar, do you know how a Sith weapon of such destructive capabilities ended under the temple? Obi-Wan was the one who asked the question that was on every Jedi's tongue. I gave them a cheerful smile. Oh, I was going to enjoy this. I raised my right index finger. I must make something clear, Master Jedi. I could sense a shift in their emotions. I think there was something in my grin that they found disturbing. That Nexus bomb wasn't a Sith weapon. Unfortunately, their reaction was subdued. Only frowns and cross-looks sent my way. I can't rile them up every time. Explain you will, General Vale. I nodded at Yoda. The Nexus bomb was created during what you call the Great War. It came into being thanks to a collaborative efforts of the scientists of the Jedi Order and Old Republic's Special Operations Command. As far as I know, it saw 4 actual deployments. 3 of them were by the Republic, with the 4th by the Empire after we captured one of the weapons, reverse-engineered it and improved it. My only answer were few quiet gasps and a deafening silence. My master should know. HK 117 interjected. I was a part of a team he led to capture the bomb a Republic Special Operations Unit tried to use on Korriban. HK, you don't know when to keep your mouth shut, do you? I asked, exasperated. Master, you wound me. Before I was deactivated, your exploits were made public by the Empire in order to raise morale and increase recruitment quotas. The Jedi should have this information in their archives. I'm just reminding them how awesome my master is. I glared at the droid. Since when did you become a bloody brown-noser? I snapped at HK-117. Proud response. It is not often that I have the chance to rile up the Jedi Council. The droid beamed at me. Just look at them, Master. The look on their faces is priceless. I glanced at the Jedi and smirked. Please tell me you are recording this. =RK=, General Valentra's office, GAR headquarters. Location classified Coruscant. Vale crashed in the nearest free chair, quietly cursing the still persistent weakness which clung to his body. 3 days had passed since his close encounter with evaporation, and he obviously wasn't fully recovered. While he was being treated at the Jedi Temple, Coruscant had become a much greater circus than usual, thanks to the second round of attacks. To add insult to injury, news about Grievous' escape had been leaked to the general public, causing near panic by itself. That's why Vale and Valentra had called this meeting. The newest attacks were a painful reminder that the Republic's security situation sucked, and that wasn't something either of the people gathered in the general's office was going to let slide. Valentra looked at the men and women who were sitting on the other side of his desk while sipping from a steaming cup of caf. Vale looked like he needed to catch up on a week or so of shut-eye. Next was Marek Yla, a pale human male who looked like he had crawled from some deep, dark cave. Fitting in a way. He was the director of the SBI, the Senate Bureau of Intelligence, the civilian intel agency of the Republic. Yle got the job after his predecessor died in the attack on the Senate. Marek's hard, pale eyes were examining the people in the room with cold indifference. The director of ONI, Office of Naval Intelligence, was sitting as far away from her civilian counterpart as possible. She was a middle-aged Twi'lek woman, with light green skin, which almost blended with her uniform thanks to its olive-green color. Ivan Fell had her face mostly hidden by a datapad from which she was busy reading. Last but not the least was a clone general who was indistinguishable from his more common brethren by design. He was JC-31, also known as Jack. His position in the military was an interesting one. Jack was in charge of the Republic Intelligence, the military intel agency. Ever since his Duros predecessor, General Salt Nur, was murdered during the attack on the Army's headquarters. To the unenlightened, this meeting was simply a bunch of Army and Navy officers doing their job. While that was a correct answer, it was far from complete one. With the Clone Wars ongoing as they were, and most of the Senate decimated with its remnants unable to find their asses, even with a recon platoon guiding them, the importance of the meeting and the people participating in it couldn't be understated. Beside the Chancellor and Master Yoda, the most powerful people in the Republic were gathered in Valentra's office. To be fair, no one, especially either of them, knew what consequences their meeting would have in the fullness of time. But that was a story better told much later. Valentra drank some of his caf and forced himself to smile. Now that we are all here. He trailed off and pressed a button under his desk. A wave of static electricity passed through the room a moment before its door slammed shut. Various shields and counter-surveillance fields sprang to life, isolating them from the outside world. With a simple press of a button, they were in one of the most secure places in the Republic as far as unwanted eyes and ears were concerned. "Now we can talk freely," added General Valentra. The only answer he received were 4 guarded nods. First item. It's obvious to all of us that we need to clean house and plug the leaks to the CIS before it is too late. 42. Chapter 17, Part 1. Rogue Knight, Phase 17, Future Imperfect. =RK=. Part 1. Industrial District. Helios, Coruscant Darth Sidious, prowled through one of his secret sanctuaries within the very heart of the Republic. It wasn't exactly a place what one would associate as the lair of the Dark Lord of the Sith. In fact, his current adobe was a luxury executive apartment on one of the highest floors of a building housing a droid assembly plant. Officially, he was visiting a wealthy Coruscanti magnate who had few issues concerning the build-up of the Republic Army to bring up with an old friend. Needless to say, the truth was a bit different. Said businessman was one of the many puppets of Palpatine, this one even helping him willingly and making a fortune from the war. Of course, the man, one George Cole, was unaware of the Chancellor's true identity and real plans for the future, though he might have approved. It didn't matter. Cole had been under the Force-induced influence of Sidious for a long time, making him little more than a puppet if the Sith Lord so wished. As it was, the magnate was providing Sidious with a foolproof alibi, while the Sith Lord was busy investigating how exactly his plans went awry. Again, Palpatine had a datapad in hand and was reading reports from 2 different sources about the attack on the Jedi Temple, which was executed the previous day. On the face of it, the raid went flawlessly. Almost too good to be true, and it was. He was looking at 2 documents in particular. One was the GAR preliminary report about the attack on the Jedi Temple, and the other was the summary from the CIS agents who made it out after the attack. There were subtle but critical differences. On the face of it, the reports agreed. The CIS agents had infiltrated the building without too much trouble, and by all accounts had achieved their primary objectives despite suffering heavy casualties. The high points were the death of some Jedi, whose names were included in the GAR report, something that brought the Sith Lord a lot of pleasure. Further, thanks to the successful break into the Jedi Temple's comm tower, his hands were untied. Now Sidious could provide ever better intelligence to the CIS in order to steer them against targets he needed eliminated, or straight into traps if he deemed it necessary. Even better, that mercenary Bane managed to get his hands on more than one Jedi holocron. With that fool Bola Ropal captured and the crystal secured, it was only a matter of persuading the Jedi Master or one of his brethren to unlock the data. That would give Sidious access to the most powerful Force-sensitive children the Order knew about. By retrieving or disposing of them, he would strike another blow to the Jedi, one aimed at their very future. Not that the fools had any, that was the good news. As great as it were, it failed to make up for what had happened next. Yesterday, Sidious had almost died along with most of the Jedi on Coruscant. That was a stunning revelation. The Force didn't warn him about any danger. The only thing he felt was the light side in the temple weakening, which he thought was due to the raid being more successful than his wildest dreams. Instead, he had come close to being blown up by something called a Nexus bomb. Sidious didn't recall ever hearing about it, but he would make sure by checking up his Sith archives. It was supposedly some kind of area denial weapon from the Great War, which used the Force as an energy source to charge a massive explosion, or so the GAR believed. What made that part of the report even more interesting was that Vale had confirmed it. Ah, the rogue. That strange man was becoming more and more interesting. Sidious would need to move soon and contact him with a proposition to join his side, or kill him for being so troublesome. Either way, that self-styled Sith was becoming too dangerous to be left on his own devices. But he could wait a bit. What Sidious wanted to know right now is how one of his CIS pawns knew about that bomb under the Jedi Temple. Whoever that person was who almost got him killed wasn't working alone. First he was wounded during the attack on the Senate, and now he almost died again. This was no coincidence. Someone within the CIS was attempting to get rid of him. The questions remained: who was to blame and whether he or they knew his true identity. Provided that Dooku wasn't to blame. Sidious grimaced. He had to clean up house before he could continue building the foundations for his galactic empire. That was the bright spot. Thanks to the recent attacks, pushing through the necessary laws had become much easier. Palpatine continued reading the reports until something unusual caught his attention. It was about the infiltrators. The fact that they were Force adepts with somewhat decent training was something he knew. He was also aware of the artifacts they used to conceal themselves. By the Force, he was wearing one similar to what they used, which helped hide the fact that he was a Force adept. However, in his case, it was a contingency in case that for some reason he was unable to maintain the technique, hiding his true face. No, all those things were almost trivial. What surprised him was that those men and women had some substantial cybernetic augmentations. That, combined with the artifacts, should have cut them from the Force, making them unable to use it. He frowned. Someone within the CIS had either made a breakthrough or had found a previously forgotten cache of knowledge to achieve that. And he learned about it in a GAR report of all things. Sidious snarled and drew a secure comm device from the folds of his midnight black robes. Someone was going to pay for this. $RK, Munificent Command Ship, Invisible Blade, Hyperspace. Count Dooku glared at one of his most trusted agents from his command chair. The Chiss woman had her eyes lowered in shame. She was kneeling on the metal floor of the bridge, while the droids manning the consoles around her and her master paid them no attention. "This is unacceptable," declared the Sith Lord. "I expected much more from the leader of my dark acolytes." Dooku's voice rumbled through the bridge. "Severance, we didn't go to such lengths to fake your death, only for you to prove next to useless in this new role. You will explain this failure. Now," he snapped at the kneeling woman. "My lord, my investigation started after the first attacks on Coruscant. On the face of it, everything was simple, or should have been so. In both cases, we got better information on the Republic military and security forces in the capital system than the GAR itself. In hindsight, it was too good to be true. As you know, Master, it was—" "But not in a way that either of us would have expected," muttered Dooku. Indeed, if the CIS forces attacking Coruscant had simply walked into a trap, he wouldn't have been so concerned. Minus the fact that in such a case, he still would have been a prisoner to the Jedi. The plans for both attacks were altered, while the forces were en route and sent to the commanders designated to execute the operations. The basics remained the same. Take the first series of attacks, the ones in which you were freed, Master. Extrapolate. The command staff in CIS headquarters crafted the basic plan. An operation to capture the Chancellor and as many senators as possible. A spoiling attacks against few critical GAR bases, slowing down the enemy response. Finally, a direct action against the Jedi Temple in a secondary attempt to free you if Palpatine couldn't be persuaded to order your and Grievous's release. It worked, more or less, but the release of Blue Shadow on Coruscant dealt a heavy blow on our credibility. That's before a nerve agent was used at the Senate. Even killing so many of the Republic leadership won't make up for what we lost, growled Dooku. That's correct, Master. The additions to the plan were added by parties unknown, using council codes. Though I was unable to confirm any treason on their parts, I scanned the minds of the suspects. They had no idea about any of this. That bit of information caught the Count's attention. He had expected that some councillors were playing their own game. By the Force, he knew that they were plotting. But this mess not being their fault was a concern. It implied that there was a faction within the CIS he knew nothing about, a competent and dangerous one at that. I had two avenues of investigation open. First, one of my tech experts was able to locate the network hub from which the order alternations originated. Second, perhaps a more important clue, was the intelligence we received from sources within the GAR. The forces that were used in the first attack on the Jedi Temple was what caught our attention. Dooku gave her a grim nod. The Force, using clones of my dark acolytes who spearheaded that assault, allowing a commando team to release me. They were led by a clone of you, one that the new Republic General, Vale, defeated and now has as an apprentice. This is correct, Master. About which investigation should I speak first? I want to know the origin of the altered orders. I started my hunt in the heart of the CIS military headquarters. =RK General Valentra's office. GAR headquarters. Location classified, Coruscant. It is decided then, declared Yvonne Fell, the civilian head of ONI. We know it's a trap, supplied Jack. The clone didn't relish sending his brethren in another meat grinder, but sometimes it simply couldn't be helped. One we have to spring, said Vale. Indeed, we are offered a tempting bait. Those new factories on Geonosis can't be allowed to come online, added Director YLA. The new chief of SBI didn't like it any more than the rest of the people in the room. The target was one that couldn't be left alone. Furthermore, the intelligence had come from a source within CIS none of the people present could confirm as one of their own. Yet the Chancellor considered the information to be God's own gospel. Under other circumstances, none of them would have it found too strange that Palpatine had his own private sources on the other side. After all, he was a politician with decades of experience on the galactic stage, with all the contacts that implied. But now, after the attacks on Coruscant, when the war was becoming something personal for the people of the Republic, not some distant conflict fought in the Outer Rim, it made one think. The CIS Council had to see the writing on the wall. The Clone Wars had become a conflict of survival. Simply put, the Separatists couldn't afford to lose, especially their leadership. All of them had a parsec-long war crimes charges waiting for them in such a case. Both the surviving senators and the masses wanted blood. So why did one of Palpatine's friends feed the Republic this information, when if the CIS lost, even the Chancellor's growing influence might be unable to keep their necks off the chopping block? After all, if it was the oldest motive, money and power, you needed to be alive and free to make use of them. Then again, it could be blackmail or something like that. Even someone who had a change of faith after the spectre of the biological weaponry was released. Nevertheless, Mark couldn't help but wonder. Something didn't feel right with that information. If he had to be fair to himself, there was something off with the whole war. He should know. He had access to more information about the conflict bar almost anyone in the galaxy. It was one of the questionable perks about his position as a director of the SBI. Well, we'll be starting Angel Fall within the week, declared Valentra. Everyone gave him a slight nod. It would be barely enough time to organize things in the critical locations of their organizations across the galaxy. However, the simple truth was that they could scarcely afford to wait even that long. The Republic was leaking intelligence on all fronts like a busted dam, which in turn was the rancor no one was willing to talk about so far. "Let's cut to the chase, shall we?" asked General Vale. Valentra smirked. It was about time. "So you want us to discuss the obvious, eh, boss?" quipped Jack. "Finally," he muttered. It was Ivan who actually said it aloud. "We all have some idea how badly the enemy agents had penetrated the Republic. That, combined with the strategic advantage the CIS has until our economy is firmly on war footing and we can muster our clone armies with new recruits. We should have been military defeated in the first 4 to 6 months of the conflict." There was grim silence after her declaration. If there was anyone who knew how true her words were, it were the people assembled in Valentra's office. The GAR and the Republic Navy, before it was folded under the Army's umbrella for the duration of the conflict, simply didn't have the numbers to hold off the CIS. But some enemies' strategic decisions simply make no sense whatsoever if they fought to win the war, said Vale. The intelligence chiefs looked at him grimly. They all had read highly classified reports saying the same thing. There were too many instances where the enemy had been making disastrous decisions. Even more concerning, a lot of the analysts who had created those reports had been either reassigned or had suffered fatal accidents. Then there were other cases where Republic forces were either ambushed and annihilated or simply placed in a position which would ensure long and hard campaign. "You've seen the pattern," Yle deadpanned. "Someone wants a protracted war," Valentra whispered, with a venom in his voice. It was his boys and girls who were paying the price. It was a simple sentence, yet it would have repercussions no one in the meeting could have imagined. Isn't it interesting how just a few words could be the pebble that would one day cause an avalanche changing the whole galaxy? $RK=. 2 days earlier, Security Center Jedi Temple. One of the clone technicians monitoring the various sensor feeds from within the Jedi Temple stumbled upon something interesting. A small sphere-shaped drone, one of the hundreds patrolling the corridors of the vast building, passed near a group of Jedi Masters. To the clone's surprise, Mace Windu was one of them. That fact by itself would have been more than enough to get his undivided attention, even if he wasn't one of General Vale's special operatives. The clone, who was going by the name of Ink, which went with his face designation, listened carefully what the Jedi discussed. They would meditate, hoping that the Force would lead them to the most threatened Jedi children. That made sense to the agent. He was made aware by his contacts what had been the point of the holocron theft that occurred days prior. The CIS, or at least Dooku's agents, now had access to the means to read the information on the names and locations of the all-Force-sensitive children across the galaxy that the Jedi knew about, which was significant because the Order had lost contact with the Master, who had that information on an encrypted crystal on his person. Ink knew hot information when he stumbled upon it, so he had redirected various sensors and security droids to rotate around and focus on the Jedi Masters in question. To his pleasant surprise, none of them thought that there was something wrong, so he was able to listen to them and find out the location of the kids that the CIS was likely to target from the Jedi's own lips. The agent wasted no time, and at the first opportunity that presented itself, he transmitted the data to his superiors. The information was in the hands of the General Special Forces before the Jedi had made arrangements to go after the kids themselves. $RK=, Black Fleet Carrier, Dragonclaw. High orbit over Yavin 4, a second-hand cruiser which once belonged to the Republic Navy, was hanging over a green moon, which in turn orbited a gas giant. That was the current flagship belonging to a clandestine military group answering to a certain Republic general. On a deck outfitted as an intelligence gathering and processing section, a holocom message was received from a source on Coruscant. It was promptly scanned for any unwelcome surprises before being decrypted and read by an operative with sufficiently high clearance. Moments later, the intel deck of the cruiser became a beehive of controlled chaos. "Colonel, you need to see this." A man wearing grey uniform showing no sign of any insignia looked up from a datapad from which he was reading. He was the clone in charge of the steadily increasing, in both capacity and reach, Black Operations outfit created by his commanding officer. "What is it, Operations?" he answered in a mellow voice, which was a bit unusual for one of the copies of Jango Fett. We have a confirmed case shallow dream. We just got 4 locations: Glee Anselm, Rodia, Naboo, and Onderon. The Jedi believed that the subject on Glee Anselm has been lost already. Naboo and Rodia. We don't have assets that can reach Onderon before the Jedi. We have at 2 units as a part of the blockade over Naboo. One of our Q ships should be able to reach Rodia before the Jedi. Good. Dispatch the teams. I want the colony below us to be up and running ASAP. It will be needed if we are able to get any of the kids. Is this all? There is nothing else that can't wait for the briefing in 3 hours, Colonel. Carry on then. 43. Chapter 17, Pattern 2. Phase 17, Future Imperfect, DT =, RK =. Part 2, Republic Frigate. Keen blade, high orbit over Rodia. A heavy Republic frigate blinked into existence, finishing a short hyperspace jump. The ship was squeaking a current Navy IFF, designating it as a part of the Deep Core Reserve Fleet. That much was true. On paper. In reality, the frigate was one of the few dozen official warships doing odd jobs for General Vale's Black Operations Division. Keen Blade had been returning from its latest mission, that of a glorified taxi for a bunch of clones testing some of the new toys cooked up by the R&D division when she and her crew received new orders. They were to secure a couple of VIPs on Rodia, which was only a couple of short jumps from the frigate's current location. A few hours later, the warship arrived over the Rodian homeworld and launched a heavy shuttle escorted by a quartet of upgraded torrents. Just in case something went wrong, the transport was carrying 9 heavily armed and armored clones. =RK Republic Navy. Nomad Flight Rodia. Sergeant Soap glanced over his men, who were looking at the droid strapped near the shuttle's cockpit. The robot was plugged into a tactical console, surfing the Rodian civilian holonet, while they all waited for the machine to find some more information about their targets besides names and general location. The NCO in charge of the retrieval team made a final check of his men equipment. His heavy gunners, Tank and Grunt, were clad in full armor, turning them into 2-meter-tall juggernauts made of shields and composites. They were carrying rotary cannons and backpacks full with ammo. Next was the demo expert, a crazy bastard calling himself Drake. The fella was wearing the same medium armor as the rest of his troops, resembling what the commandos were equipped with at the start of the conflict. The main difference were the crimson flames painted on the man's helmet. Drake was hugging his grenade launcher, even petting the damn thing. Soap was almost sure that his somewhat disturbing soldier was whispering sweet nothings to the gun. He really didn't want to know. Besides, Drake was fiendishly good with everything that made bang, which made up for his quirks. The backpack chock full with exploding goodies for every situation helped out too. Next were the pair of a sniper and spotter, Reaper and Farsight. Those two could wreak havoc on an enemy from kilometers away. Plus, neither of them had any disturbing habits, making them Soap's favorites. Finally, the 3 ordinary grunts. First Ghost, an infiltrator and close-quarters combat specialist. He was a good man, but had the uncanny habit of stalking his teammates to hone his skills, or so he said. Ghost had nearly caused Soap a heart attack a few times. There was Doc, the squad medic, who had a really morbid sense of humor, and last but not the least, Wes, an average grunt, who was still wondering how he ended up teamed up with those maniacs. Wee Dunn, 11-month-old Rodian, lives with his single mother Mate Dunn in K-Tap Square. Father deceased, no other living relatives on the planet. Holographic emitters built into the shuttle's troop compartment came to life, showing a 3D map of a domed city and zooming in until a single small house was visible. A window opened next to the map, showing a smiling Rodian woman proudly holding a toddler. "Those 2 are the VIPs we're after," declared Soap. "The kid is the primary objective. We are to retrieve him unharmed at all costs. If practical, we should get the mother too. If by some miracle this op goes without a hitch." Soap waited for the chuckling to subside. "We're to just go there and take them into protective custody." "Fat chance," muttered Doc. "Indeed, we are never that lucky," deadpanned Tank. Soap snorted. It was damn true. At least now they had some decent equipment at hand. For a moment he looked at the back of the shuttle, remembering the banter of his men in the armory. RK Flashback. Armory Republic frigate. Keenblade hyperspace. Gear hobbled after his squad mates. He was going to make a final checkup on their armor and equipment, hoping to avoid an accident like the one which nearly crippled him on their last mission. Drake, we know how much you love the new launchers and want to have a love child with them. However, if you shoot again one of the ion grenades danger close, even the improved armor won't save you. Hey, your armor was fine. The discharge barely scorched it. How was I supposed to know that the ion grenades you were carrying were defective and would go off at the slightest discharge near you? Exclaimed the demo expert. Idiot. If I was wearing the standard armor, my nervous system would be fired right now. Next time take one of these babies and it won't matter, interjected Grunt while gently patting the chest plate of his heavy armor. I'm the damn tech, not a walking tank. What the hell is wrong with you all? Oh, chill off already, exclaimed Ghost. The infiltrator was checking up his brand new carbine and its underslung grenade launcher. The weapon was much better than the standard gear used by the clones ever since the war started. It was more accurate, had different fire modes and hardpoints for mounting additional equipment. Sweet, isn't it? I can't wait to see how well it takes apart droids and people, muttered Doc. Who was the genius that made him a medic anyway? Wes wondered aloud. I heard that kid. Criff it all. Stow it, soldiers. Doc, you won't be messing up with Wes, is that clear? And you, Drake, if you pull a stunt like that again, you'll explaining to me why I shouldn't put your ass on report. Is this clear? Soap's voice silenced the banter of his maniacs. Why me? Wondered the NCO. What did he did to deserve serving with these lunatics under his command? Clear, sir. Though Grunt has a point, if we all wore the heavy armors, that incident wouldn't have hurt gear. Those suits are a sweet piece of work. They are shielded against ion discharges. They even have motorized joints so we can carry even bigger guns and more ammo. Tank spoke with a gleam in his eyes. That's right, added Grunt. And look at this armor. It can stop at least a couple of heavy blaster bolts. He patted the chest plate of his suit. Yeah, I can't wait. Soon enough, all of our brothers will have such gear, and then the criffing droids are going straight to the scrap heap. That's nothing. I heard from one of the eggheads that all equipment we are testing is merely a stopgap until the exoskeletons and power armor finish development, added Reaper. Rediscover them, you mean, said Gear. I'm fairly sure that power armor and light exoskeletons were used during the Great War a few thousand years ago. It's a pity the Republic had lost all that tech. Show off, muttered Farsight. What? The man loves studying history in his copious free time. What's wrong with that? Wes wondered aloud. Flashback end. RK =, Jaguar City, Naboo. Easy job, you said. Protect a little girl. What could possibly go wrong? You had to say it, didn't you, Fixer? Grumbled Scorch as he ducked under a burst of fire. Around the members of Delta Squad of the Republic Commandos, a once pristine city street was promptly becoming a slice of hell. More shooting, deal with Fixer's big mouth later, shouted Scorch a moment before throwing a pair of thermal detonators. The deadly spheres flew through the window of a nearby house, the current firebase of a group of mercenaries. Second later, those men ceased to exist, along with most of the building they used as a shelter. That was a bit much, Scorch, chided their commander. No such thing as an overkill, boss, quipped the demo expert. Bloody jokers, grunted a nearby clone wearing armor painted in black and grey. The situation was foobarred to hell and back. 3 separate groups of clones sent to secure one little girl and her family until some Jedi arrived to retrieve them. It should have been a trivial exercise. Instead, the Republic troopers found themselves in a 5-sided running battle across the streets of Jaguar City. First, the various Republic units coming for the kid. Second, some local resistance fighters who resented the blockade and partial occupation of Naboo decided to throw a row. Then the folks of a PMC, hired to boost security on the planet and relieve some of the pressure on the GAR ground forces, started shooting at everyone, hell-bent on taking the kid too. And just to make everything even more fucked up, it turned out that a local criminal cartel had moved their stash of illegal goods near the kid's home after the blockade came into effect. So the damn criminals decided to join the party too. Finally, a squad clad in featureless advanced armor was making a beeline towards Delta Squad's position and the VIPs they were desperately trying to keep alive, while systematically gunning down everything in their way. Part 3 teaser, K-Tap Square City Rodia. Nomad Flight's Navy IFF cleared the assault shuttle for landing reasonably close to their target's house. The clones disembarked and headed to their designated positions. Reaper and Farsight went to a nearby tower, which provided a good line of sight to the Dunn house. Ghost went ahead to scout, using the built-in stealth features of his armor to vanish from sight. A minute later, Soap led the rest of his team towards their target, created a show for the few passer-by, who stared at the Republic troopers. You can say many things for the heavy armored duo, but inconspicuous they certainly were not. Soon enough, Soap had in front of the Dunn's house, ringing the doorbell while Ghost was sneaking around the back in case of trouble. The sergeant could hear someone moving inside the house and coming closer, so the droid was right and the Dunns were home. He heard quiet beeping and the front door slid open. Soap's eyes widened when he saw a blaster pointing at his head. He had an instant to process the sight, throw his body into motion before the gun fired. 44, Chapter 17. Part 3. Phase 17. Future Imperfect. =RK, Part 3. K-Tap Square City. Rodia Nomad Flight's Navy IFF cleared the assault shuttle for landing reasonably close to their target's house. The clones disembarked and headed to their designated positions. Reaper and Farsight went to a nearby tower, which provided a good line of sight to the Dunn house. Ghost went ahead to scout, using the built-in stealth features of his armor to vanish from sight. A minute later, Soap led the rest of his team towards their target, creating a show for a few pedestrians who stared at the Republic troopers. You can say many things for the heavy armored duo of the squad, but inconspicuous they certainly were not. Soon enough, Soap was in front of the Dunn house, ringing the doorbell, while Ghost was sneaking around the back in case of trouble. The sergeant could hear someone moving inside the house and coming closer, so the droid was right and the Dunns were home. He heard quiet beeping and the front door slid open. Soap's eyes widened when he saw a blaster pointing at his head. He had an instant to process the sight and throw his body into motion before the gun fired. A ruby-colored bolt of energy flew true, straight at Soap's helmet. The sergeant saw a flash of light an instant before he hit the ground. His training kicked in, and he rolled away, clearing the line of fire. Wes wasted no time on being surprised that a civilian woman shot his commander without provocation. He took aim and pressed the trigger. The grenade launcher slung under the barrel of his carbine thumped quietly. The female Rodian was struck in the chest by a stun round, neutralizing her by sending enough current into her body to knock her out twice over. "Sweep the house and find the kid," ordered Doc. In the next moment, simultaneous explosions of multiple concussion grenades rattled the house. The clones moved in, sweeping for hostiles. At the back, Ghost was about to take out his slicing kit and start dealing with the locked door when it slid open. A robed figure holding the toddler they were after was standing in the doorframe. "Contact back. I have eyes on the target." Ghost sub-vocalized. "Copy that." Bane glared at a slight shimmer in the air in front of him. He made a punching motion with his free arm, activating the blaster built in his arm guard. A hail of crimson shots shredded the sleeve of his robe and swept the backyard. 2 blaster bolts slammed into an invisible figure, dissipating the stealth field. The bounty hunter snarled. The clone he shot should be dead. Instead, the man shrugged off the impacts, taking them on an until then invisible shield. Bane was sure that he would have died at that moment if it wasn't for the kid he was holding. The Rodian boy was the only reason the damn clone didn't drill him with a burst of blaster fire then and there. Instead, the infiltrator took careful aim while Bane continued shooting at the soldier. He didn't have much choice. Even more troopers were storming through the building behind him. The bounty hunter needed to take care of the man blocking his way fast and leg it while he still could. The shield deflected 4 more bolts before shattering and leaving the clone vulnerable. Bane cursed and shot again a moment before Ghost pressed the trigger himself. Red energy splashed over the clone's armor, gorging the composite. He stumbled back, throwing off his aim. A burst of blue fire grazed Bane's right shoulder instead of turning it into bloody mist. The bounty hunter hissed in pain, but didn't let the wound slow him down. The Duros darted forward and kicked Ghost in the chest before the clone could recover from the hits. The clone was thrown to his back, giving the mercenary the opening he was looking for. That was all Bane needed, and he didn't waste the opportunity. He activated the small rocket motors in his reinforced boots and flew up, heading straight for his fighter. "One hostile is flying away with the VIP," Ghost hissed in pain. While his shield and armor tanked enough punishment to kill a few clones, he didn't get out unscratched. The shots, which connected with his chest and shoulders, while stopped by the tough composite, still scorched up a bit his flesh directly under the impact points. Still, while painful, it was much better than the alternative. "Affirmative. I have him in my sights," Reaper said. "I have eyes on the landing pad he's headed for," added Farsight. "Take the shot once he lands, but don't hit the kid," Soap ordered. The sergeant was back on his feet and assisting his men in sweeping the house. "Wilco," Reaper confirmed. =RK, =. Bane landed few meters from his brand-new fighter, bending his knees to help absorb the impact. He was almost home free. The bounty hunter stood up and took a step towards his ride off the giant swamp that was Rodia when a sledgehammer struck him from behind. He stumbled forward, falling and spilling the kid, who hit the ground hard. Though Bane noticed none of that, all his attention was taken by the blinding pain in what used to be his right shoulder. A huge chunk of it was missing. Whatever hit him almost took off his right arm entirely. Acting on instinct, he pressed his left hand on the seared wound where his shoulder used to be, making him scream in agony. Then his training and experience kicked in. Somehow, Bane managed to fight his way through the pain and the shock, which was beginning to numb his body. A sniper. It had to be. For a moment, he fancied the thought of trying to grab the kid and jump into his fighter. However, that feeble hope was immediately dashed when an azure blaster bolt blew a hole in the landing pad near his head. Bane groaned. The message was clear. Do something dumb and you die. Still, he might have risked it, if it wasn't for the familiar whine of ion engines. He carefully rolled to his back, hissing in pain at every little jolt and pull, and looked up. Two pairs of what appeared to be meaner-looking torrent fighters were circling like vultures over the closest exit of the domed city. With him wounded, Bane didn't have any illusions that he would be able to breach the atmosphere before those fighters shot him down. If the damn sniper didn't get him first, that is. Caught by a bunch of clones. What a criffing disgrace, he muttered, waiting for the soldiers to reach him. Nearby, the Rodian kid laid clutching a broken arm to his chest, wailing for his mother. =RK, Jaguar City, Naboo. QRF will be higher in 5, shouted the comm specialist of the platoon, which had accompanied Delta Squad for the VIP extraction. "We may not last that long," grunted one of the clones in black and grey armor. "Unfortunately, he's correct," added Fixer. The two squads wearing armor colored in the new pattern were an unexpected but pleasant surprise once all hell broke loose. "Trandosian heavies," shouted a soldier, moments before the distinctive sound of slugs screaming through the air made the cacophony of battle ever greater. "How the hell did the locals miss someone like that?" exclaimed the last member of Delta Squad, who had taken position on a nearby balcony and was sniping the opposing forces. If he was a lesser man, the sight of the pair of overgrown lizards, clad in crude yet fearsome armor and carrying rotary cannons, would have made him blanch. The Trandosians had appeared from a side street, missed by everyone until they opened fire on a group of Gungan rebels. Seconds later, the locals were simply gone, torn to bloody chunks by heavy slugs. They were either too busy playing rebel fighters or were outright bought, Scorch deadpanned. "Won't surprise me," Boss agreed. "We need to pull out to a better position. Delta, we are keeping the VIPs safe. Targ platoon, start falling back by squads at my signal. The folks in that fancy armor are tearing a new one on the PMCs. The traitors that are left on the right flank will be gone soon," said Delta's sniper. He had a great view, allowing him to see how the strangers were taking apart the mercs without really slowing down. They took the enemy fire on their shields and armor and gunned down the PMC troopers like the scum they were. "That's all and good, but we are next," deadpanned one of the regular clones. "Half of my people can't pull out without passing through those heavies' field of fire. shouted Targ's lieutenant. "We'll deal with them. Just get your people out, now," answered one of the men wearing the new paint pattern. $RK. A man armed with a heavy blaster blew apart the last mercenary in his way. 6 figures clad in light power armor proceeded to annihilate a group of local rebels who had the misfortune to be in their way and fell on the next obstacle in their path. A squad of clones. Corporal Hal had a nice view of the PMC flank. He watched as the mercs were torn asunder and knew that he and his men were next. The clone had positioned his troopers as well as their position allowed, though he was almost certain that it wouldn't be enough. His people were armed only with the standard loadout, which was light weapons and some grenades. His only hope was that the few thermal detonators they had would be enough to stop the armored titans that were advancing towards their position. It was not to be. Heavy weapons roared, blaster carbines spat back in defiance. Thermal detonators and frag grenades flew in both directions. Hal hissed a curse when he saw the enemies move away from the immediate blast radius with speed that should have been impossible for someone who carries that much weaponry and armor. Bright flashes robbed him from his sight for a couple of seconds. When he could see again, Hal groaned. Half his men were down. As far as he could see, the horrors who were slaughtering any opposition in their path were still unscratched. He could hear them coming closer. A figure in grey armor appeared before Hal, and he pressed the trigger of his gun. Heavy weapons spoke aloud, answered by blaster carbines. For a moment, that little corner of the battlefield grew quiet. The half-vaporized body of Hal fell to the ground in a smoking heap of seared flesh and melted armor. "I have the target. She is 120 meters northeast from here," announced a mechanically distorted voice. "Good, we are going in," the man leading the unknown Black Ops unit ordered. 5 and 6, hit the clone platoon and buy us some time. The rest are with me. $RK. Clone Sergeant Sol shot a rebel in the back and ducked back behind a half-demolished wall. A simple babysitting task. Right. Lorne, Zed, flank the bastards. We'll keep their attention occupied, the NCO ordered. Those two nodded and darted into a nearby half-demolished building, leaving the rest of their squad to deal with the two heavies. Saul winced when one of the Trandosians concentrated on his hiding place. The sound of bullets chewing up the low wall he was using as a cover dug into his brain. "Concussion and smoke grenades on my signal," the sergeant ordered in the squad net. He made a sharp signal and grenades were thrown at the slowly advancing lizards. Seconds later, he was shaken by a series of danger-close explosions. A spread of thermal detonators had detonated, engulfing the enemy heavy troopers in a wave of scorching fire. Saul carefully looked over his cover, just in time to see the melted and twisted remains of a rotary cannon crash on the debris-covered street. There was no further sight of the two Trandosians. From the pair he sent, only a hobbling Zed returned. $RK. Fixer, cover the VIPs. Me and Scorch will provide you with cover. Go, ordered Boss. His subordinate grabbed the Gungan woman and dragged her and the toddler away. A sniper cracked above them, providing additional suppressive fire. Meanwhile, squads of clones were leapfrogging backwards in an attempt to disengage from worst of the fighting. They were moderately successful, thanks to the low level of training that most of their opponents had. The biggest snag came when a heavily armed pair in power armor flanked the clones at the front. That stopped the attempted withdrawal cold, while some of the Republic troopers tried to aid their comrades. "Boss, hostiles on top of your position," Sev shouted. "Get down," ordered the commander. It wasn't a moment too soon. The whole front of a nearby building exploded in a rain of debris and blaster fire. 3 clones from Targ platoon were too close and were torn apart. The rest of their squad followed suit moments later, however their sacrifice bought enough time for the rest of their platoon and Delta to react. Boss rolled behind a nearby aircar, while Scorch took cover around the nearest corner. "They might be a problem," muttered the demo expert when he saw who exactly was attacking them. 3 men and a woman, clad in what suspiciously looked like a working power armor. Each of them was carrying some kind of heavy energy weapon. "They have shields too," added Sev. He could clearly see how a clone in standard white armor was shooting at the new threat, only for his blaster bolts to be harmlessly absorbed by a form-fitting bluish field. "That's bullshit," whispered Boss. 45, Chapter 17. Part 4. Phase 17, Future Imperfect. Part 4. Jaguar City, Naboo. Sev reloaded his sniper rifle and took aim. Below him, the group of power-armored enemies made no attempt to seek cover, making them easy targets. However, it didn't really matter. Their shields made the defenses of the droidekas look insignificant in comparison. The sniper took a deep breath and gently squeezed the trigger. The weapon in his arms buckled, hitting his shoulder painfully despite the anti-recoil systems built in his gun. A green pulse of concentrated energy struck Sev's target, splashing over Azur's shield. Nevertheless, the sheer power of the hit staggered the man despite his power armor. Sev wasted no time. He reacquired his target and pressed the trigger again and again. The second shot shattered the man's shields. The third struck him in the head, a couple of centimeters above his left eye socket. The helmet cracked under the tremendous stress. Its outer layer ablated in an attempt to disperse most of the hit's energy. If it wasn't for the armor's design, it would have ended then and there, no matter what else the shot did. Its sheer kinetic energy should have snapped the man's neck, but the armor locked in place, saving him from that fate. However, he didn't get away unscratched. While the power armor deflected or absorbed most of the sniper's shot energy, it couldn't negate all of it. The man crumbled to the ground with cracked skull and massive concussion, taking him out of the battle. Moment after pressing the trigger for the third time, Sev whirled around and left the balcony he used as a vantage point. He didn't wait to see what his shots did. As it turned out, it was the prudent thing to do. Two of the power-armored enemies had detected his positions. They raised their heavy weapons and unleashed a hail of laser bolts and plasma upon the house where the commando disappeared. The building materials which the locals used proved little deterrence to the firepower unleashed onto the house. Its facade crumbled as if made of sand, while spears of energy ravaged the building's interior. Sev hissed a curse when the floor disappeared under his feet. He waved his arms, desperately trying to catch something stable. His hands clamped on a jagged piece of floor which remained whole and attached to a nearby wall, stopping himself from falling 2 floors down. The commando tried to climb up when a bolt of plasma passed him by a hairbreadth. His shields overloaded, and he shouted in pain as his back was seared red despite his backpack and all the equipment in it. Another close miss scalded his left hand, which convulsed in pain. In the next instant, Sev found himself falling down, with the remains of the floor collapsing over him. $RK, $. Down on the street, the remaining members of Delta Squad were frantically modding their DC-17 blasters. The versatile weapon system was the only chance they saw against the juggernauts advancing against them. Scorch was the first to finish refurbishing his carbine into its grenade launcher variant. He only hoped that the limited amount of ammo each of his brothers carried would be enough. The demo expert leaned around the street corner behind which he was taking cover, took aim and shot at the closest enemy. The armored behemoth was only 10 meters away, and thankfully he wasn't looking in the commando's direction. The AP grenade came as a nasty surprise for the enemy combatant. It detonated against his shields, blowing him half a meter back. Scorch watched his target intently while his left hand went to his harness to retrieve another grenade. However, the commando didn't have time to reload. He saw another one of the power-armored assailants turn his way. A man-portable cannon turned his way, and Scorch darted back behind the corner. He sprinted down the side street and dived forward. A moment later, the corner of the house behind which he hid blew apart under heavy blaster fire. The blast wave shattered his shields, while various pieces of debris bombarded him, bouncing off his armor. Meanwhile, Fixer was ushering the Gungan female and her kid down the boulevard, while he himself was moving backwards and sending his limited supply of grenades at the heavily armored strangers. Near misses battered their shields, yet they were undeterred. Fixers knew that the only reason he was still alive was because he was close to the VIPs, and the power-armored soldiers wanted them alive. Boss sent a grenade in the gut of the man who Scorch attacked, putting him down once and for all. Second later, he found himself flying backwards. A burst of heavy blaster fire blew up the air car he used for cover, sending him tumbling through the air. If it wasn't for his shields tanking the brunt of the shockwave, he would have died then and there. As it was, Delta Squad's commander flew through the shattered front of a nearby shop and landed on a vegetable stand. He remained conscious long enough to feel pain spreading throughout his abused body. Fixer's last AP grenade blew up a mere meter from the only woman in the quartet attacking them. Her shield vanished with a blue-tinted flash, and she was thrown to her left and fell through a shot-up wall. That left the commando to deal with the last of the power-armored men. Without anything that could hurt the criffing bastard. "Run!" Fixer shouted to his charges. He left his DC-17 fall to the ground, not bothering to try returning it into its blaster mod. The commando didn't have the time for that. Instead, he drew his pistol, hoping to distract the behemoth for few more moments. With any luck, the VIPs would be able to evade any pursuit for few minutes until the reinforcements got there. Fixer managed to press the trigger 4 times before his enemy was able to aim his heavy weapon. He was in the middle of the street, too far from any cover that could resist the firepower he was facing. The commando sent one last blaster bolt at his nemesis while waiting for the inevitable. $RK =, abandoned mining station Mustafar. "This is all? Only 2 kids?" Sidious hologram sneered. The 2 droids tending to the kidnapped children decided to keep quiet and not provoke the Sith Lord. He had expected at least 4 potential minions, besides the unexpected boon that was Galen Marek. However, the Jedi's reaction had been lightning fast. Unexpected even. Who would have thought that the damn fossils on the Council would have called the GAR for help instead of sending their own? So instead of Jedi scrambling to reach the targeted kids, the initial response has been from the nearest units of the Republic Army. Further, Bane had been able to retrieve only one child, the boy from Onderon, before he went missing on Rodia. Sidious closed his eyes and concentrated. The shadow in the Force continued blocking his sight, yet despite that, he could sense that it was unlikely that he would get any more children from the list. Whatever. Those 2 would have to do. "Commence with the operation," he ordered the droids. "Master, with subjects at this age, the procedure has over 50% mortality rate," declared one of the machines. "At least one of them will make it. That would be sufficient." "Proceed," Sidious snapped. Lately his patience had been growing increasingly thin. "As you command," both droids answered in unison. One of the kids caught Sidious's eyes. It was the unlucky one, whose parents tried and failed to avoid the order's scrutiny, and by extension, that of his own agents. "Galen Marek, I sense interesting future in front of you, my boy. I wonder what would have you done with yourself if you remained out of my reach." The toddler looked at his transparent projection and waved, sending a bit of force with his gesture. The Sith Lord chuckled. The kid was strong. Given enough time, he might make a powerful agent. Soon enough, the operation began, and agonized screams replaced the children's curiosity. By the time the Jedi could pinpoint the source of their suffering through the Force, the kids would be gone without a trace. Because once they were done, the droids packed their charges on a waiting transport and shut down the shields, keeping the mining station protected from the lava river over which it was built. $RK Jaguar City Naboo. Vix's visor darkened an instant before he was thrown off his feet by an overpressure wave. If it wasn't for the sound dampeners built in his helmet, he was sure he would be deaf right now. When he could see again, a large section of the street where the power-armored bastard was standing was simply gone along with what had left of the facades of the nearby buildings. The ground under him shuddered again and again as heavy weaponry unleashed its fury upon the defenseless city. "I love air support," Scorch shouted in the squad's net. Fixer shook his head and glanced up. There was no sight of friendly craft, besides stilettos of blue and green light, which touched various parts of the city from the sky. The commando grinned. So much for the damn power armor. It won't do much for the criffing bastards, while the Republic had uncontested air superiority over the city. "Delta Squad, sound off," Fixer ordered. This wasn't the time to watch the fireworks. They still had a job to do. "I'm alive," declared Scorch. The demo expert's words were followed by conspicuous silence. "Damn it! Boss, Sev, you 2 alive?" Fixer asked. "I have eyes on Boss. He looks banged up, but I think he's alive," said Scorch. "No sight of Sev." "Take care of him and search for Sev. I'll get the VIPs out of here." $RK All strike elements, sound off, a female voice growled on the power-armored commando's net. The only reason she was still alive was because of that AP grenade, which threw her through a wall, thus keeping her out of sight of the enemy air support. Strike One, their unit's nominal commander, wasn't that lucky. She saw him being blown to tiny pieces by a fighter's laser cannon. "This is 5, I'm still alive. Orders?" "The mission is a bust. We are getting out of here. Exit 3. Wilco 2, see you on the other side." The woman with call sign 2, who when off-duty was known as Lieutenant Remelia Vance, checked the mini-map on her HUD display. The IFF markers of all but 2 of her unit were silent. Only 3 and 5 could be seen, though she was unsure if 3 was still alive after being shot in the head by that damn sniper. Granted, their armor was tough, but that was a bit beyond what it was usually rated against. She closed her eyes for a moment. Many of her friends had just died on this ill-advised op. She wondered who was the idiot that conceived and approved it. Remelia would love to have a little chat with that person. If she made it out in one piece, which was her priority right now, she needed to keep out of the streets or risk being nailed by the enemy air assets. That's why, after checking her map for the second time, 2 charged through the walls of the house in which she had ended. Luckily, most of the surviving clones were too busy tending for their wounded, as well as the civilians caught in the crossfire. That, or shooting up the remains of the fools that made this ill-thought op into a 5-sided fight. Moments later, Vance had to dart across a side alley. Once she reached the end of her cover, she glanced up. Smoke and soot obscured the sky, but that wouldn't be too big a problem for the enemy fighters. Without anything resembling decent ECM active in the city, the Republic air assets didn't have to rely on visual targeting or struggle with degraded sensors. She dashed through the alley and plunged through the wall of the closest building on the other side, then through second and third wall, all thanks to a barrage of laser bolts which lit up the house he just left, blowing it up sky high. If it wasn't for her armor, 2 would be on the ground, dying from multiple internal contusions. Instead, she only felt like on big, tender bruise. Remelia groaned and picked herself up. She glanced at the map and allowed herself to feel a bit of hope. She was almost there. She demolished her way through another row of houses and smiled. In front of her were houses built onto the river bisecting the city. Around the buildings, she could see multiple places where the river could be accessed by the locals. Vance wasted no more time and sprinted forward. She jumped and plunged into the water, letting the weight of her armor to drag her down. She checked her map and activated the built-in thrusters of her outfit, heading towards a stealth submarine, which was waiting for the survivors of Strike One. Once inside, she sent a series of scrambled codes towards the armors of her fallen comrades. $RK, 3 was unlucky. It looked like that the surviving clones and various other enemies had decided to make their life's mission to get him. Every time the commando thought that he broke contact, he ran straight into another armed group. Republic troopers, mercenaries, outlaws, even what appeared to be rebels. It was a bloody madness. An enemy fighter strafed the street where he was moments ago, demolishing the fronts of all nearby buildings. 3 ran through someone's living room, only to find himself face-to-face with a pair of Duros, wielding blaster pistols. They stared at him for a moment before raising their weapons. The commando decided not to waste ammo on them, and without slowing down, he simply bludgeoned the pair with the barrel of his blaster cannon. 3 darted out of the building, a second before it was disintegrated by an airstrike. The shockwave picked him up and hurled his armored form down a nearby street. All the while, he somehow remained conscious, though dazzled. The commando idly noted that the clones were really pissed off, because they were demolishing the city without caring about collateral damage in order to get him. Though the presence of rebels in the settlement might have had something to do with that. Sometime later, 3 shook himself. He was laying on an open street with no convenient cover in sight. A bunch of LA-ATs were heading in his direction. His armor was warning him that he was locked on by multiple targeting sensors. He glanced around. There was no sight of his weapon, though it wasn't a big loss. If he tried something, the weapons mounted on those assault transports would cut him to ribbons, power armor or not. 2 won't make it. Leave ASAP, he muttered in Strike One's net. Affirmative, his friend whispered in her comm. 3 returned his attention to the enemy gunships. A pair floated couple of 100 meters away, pointing all their weapons in his direction, while behind them, transports were unloading squads of clones. He sneered at the Republic's soldiers of choice. The damn clones were a disgrace. 3 sent a series of commands through his implants. A moment later, crimson warnings obscured his vision, covering most of his HUD. "For the true Republic," he whispered. 2 almost simultaneous explosions shook Jaguar, marking the self-immolation of the fallen Strike One. When the dust settled, the Republic search parties would be able to recover only 1 heavily damaged power armor, in which the self-destruct mechanism had failed. =RK General Valentra's office, GAR headquarters. Location classified /Coruscant. Now that we've finished with most present matters, Valentra trailed off while looking at a datapad. Can someone tell me who exactly deployed working prototypes of power armor against our forces on Naboo earlier today? Unknown. Our own R&D is at least few months away from testing the prototypes. At least the exoskeletons are ready for field testing and should work as a stopgap measure if we face power armor in numbers before our own is ready, the director of SIB. Did we recover at least one of those suits? Asked Vale. 1 heavily damaged. It will be dispatched for Coruscant at first opportunity. With a strong escort, I hope, the director of ONI added. That goes without saying, Valentra confirmed. Now on another topic, I understand that you'll be visiting Corellia soon, General Vale, Ivan inquired. That's the plan. I'll be heading there once the Jedi Council gets around to Windu's trial. Most people in the room winced at the mention of the Jedi Master's name. His stunts had come close to starting a civil war between the Jedi and the Republic armed forces, who in turn weren't thrilled that a high-ranked Jedi tried to arrest their acting commander-in-chief during a crisis, without a cause to make the mess even bigger. Needless to say, the outcome of the impending trial was something in which certain circles within the Republic military and civilian leadership were very interesting. One of the many reasons why was that it had the potential to heal, or make almost unbridgeable, the growing rift between many of the Jedi generals and the Republic soldiers. The intel chiefs looked at each other. General, while on Corellia, we would like you to inquire about certain matters with the system's leadership, and Senator Bel Iblis in particular. Indeed, asked the general. They had his undivided attention. 46. Interlude, Showcasing Equipment, Part 1. Interlude, Showcasing Equipment, Part 1. =RK=. Republic R&D Center location. Classified Coruscant. Login, Star Snatcher. Password, asterisk, 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 asterisk. Login successful browsing files. R&D new equipment presentation. Work in progress. Selected. Access granted. Playing file. A schematic of BR-1 Hailstorm floats in a holotank display. The rifle is modded with underslung grenade launcher, as well as reflex sight in case the uplink to a clone's HUD display is down. As you can see, the replacement for the standard blaster carbine used by our troopers is at hand. The Hailstorm is 10% more accurate. A line of clones could be seen taking aim at a modified firing range. Suddenly the light dims and dozens of holographic targets appears. They start moving erratically, more often than not, hiding behind cover strewn all over the range. A moment later, the targets start blinking out of existence, reaped by accurate burst of blaster fire. Nevertheless, that particular asset of our new weapon is of secondary value, no matter how useful. Considering the toughness of the CIS super battle droids, we deem that the next feature of the BR-1 is of a paramount importance. The Hailstorm is 25% deadlier than its predecessor, making it an ideal tool to deal with the soulless hordes of the Confederation. A clone trooper appears in the holotank. The view angle changes to reveal that he is facing a super battle droid. The soldier takes aim and sends a single tri-shot burst at the machine's chest plating. The metal plate boils at the points of impact, instant before disintegrating, thus allowing the third blaster shot to pass unimpeded into the war droid's innards. Another great feature of the Hailstorm is that each rifle is designed to work seamlessly with a multi-purpose grenade launcher. The Grendel itself is a superb piece of Republic engineering and know-how. It could fire one of 24 types of grenades, from the standard and loved fragmentation to the ever-useful high-explosive, to anti-personnel rounds containing monomolecular edged flechettes, stun and ion rounds, as well as various other munition types which would suit any situation the modern soldier could find himself in. A room full with mannequins of Geonosian natives appears in the holotank. A muted thump could be heard a second later. Then the room explodes in an eye-watering firestorm. The image changes to another group of the insect-like beings. This time, they are shredded by a storm metal shards. Naturally, the BR-1, no matter how good it is not fit for every situation. Next, I want to present you the SR-3 Reaper, multi-purpose sniper rifle. With few easy tweaks, this piece of deadly technology could be modded to fit different mission parameters. From anti-material work. The view changes again, showing a standard CIS APC moving over a rocky road. Kilometers of empty tundra could be seen on both sides of the third-rate motorway. Suddenly, the armored transport is hit. A puff of vaporized metal appears on its left side. An instant later, the APC shudders and goes out of control before going into the ditch flanking the route, to a precise anti-personnel system. This time, the image is not staged. It shows a Duros, clad in long coat, arriving on a landing pad where an advanced-looking starfighter awaits him. When the man reaches the ground, he is struck by invisible force, which takes a huge chunk from his shoulder. As the latest gruesome display shows, no one is really safe on a modern battlefield. That's why we made sure to give our boys and girls the best possible chance of survival. I want to present you our newest series of armors. Please keep in mind that no matter how good they are, those outfits are only a stepping stone for our true goal-effective combat exoskeletons and power armors. The next image is a suit of armor, similar to that worn by the clone commandos. The only apparent difference is that the new armor is a centimeter or so thicker. As you can see, the new medium armor Mark II is not very different from what we outfit our special forces with, at least in appearance. However, the Mark II is a different beast. First, it's made from a new composite, which gives it almost 2.5 times better protection against both energy and kinetic impact. Second, the Mark II has integrated shield generator, which not only doesn't need a backpack to carry, but it releases orders of magnitude less harmful radiation. A mannequin clad in said armor could be seen. It tanks the fire of 6 clones armed with the old type of carbines for a couple of seconds before the shields are depleted. Then the strength of the composite is truly shown when the unshielded armor takes enough punishment to decimate a squad worth of soldiers before it's breached. When the going gets tough, our troopers need to break out the heavy weapons. For such instances, we designed the Juggernaut heavy armor. As you can see, it somewhat resembles the medium Mark II. All the while it provides protection close to a light vehicle. The troopers' strength and battlefield endurance are vastly increased thanks to motorized joins, which not only take off a lot of pressure from a soldier's body, but allows the use of heavy weapons with ease. Further, the Juggernaut integrates much more powerful shields and can carry various other equipment. For example, a portable jammer, AA or AT missile pack, high-powered comm equipment. The next image shows a 2 meters tall behemoth of gleaming metal. He carries a heavy laser cannon. He has a backpack with 2 vertically launched AA missiles. Next, something for our scouts, the Ghost armor. It is lighter than the Mark II, though it features the same shield system. What makes this outfit a unique piece of equipment is its purpose. Thanks to built-in sound dampeners and thermo-optic camouflage field, the Ghost armor renders its wearer virtually invisible. A soldier in a slimmer, form-fitting armor is shown. Then he vanishes, leaving a barely visible haze behind. Moments later, it's gone too, leaving no sight of the man. Finally, we come to our crown achievement so far, the Raptor 01 prototype. This is our first working variant of a combat exoskeleton ready for field testing. It features Logging Off, 47, Chapter 18, Art 1. =RK=, Phase 18, Political Maneuvers, Part 1, Council Chambers, Jedi Temple, Coruscant, Good and Evil, No matter what some say, the very concept is subjective. One being's angel could very well be another's devil. It's all about one's morals, a being's individual perception of the outside world, that and the perception of the society in which you live. In a future that won't be, Vader said it best. From his point of view, the Jedi were the evil ones, while Obi-Wan naturally thought otherwise. In essence, that was why we were gathered in the Jedi Council's chambers. The Masters were about to render judgment on one of their own. And on me, though no one was saying aloud that dirty little secret. Finally, it was time for Windu's trial. The most powerful and wise of the Jedi were about to decide whether Mace acted as overzealous fool during the first attack on the temple, one who came very close to treason against the Republic, or if he was right, and I am an embodiment of the very evil the Order was formed to vanquish. I looked around, trying to keep a shit-eating grin from appearing on my face. Despite the vocal protests of some Jedi, the trial was going to be public. Even better, it was going to be transmitted live throughout the galaxy. On the downside, besides few floating camera droids and the Jedi Council, only few outsiders were permitted in this hallowed place. The first kind were the representatives of the Senate, which were Senators Padme Amidala and Bail Organa. When I tried to find out how much political capital those two spent to get the positions, I was impressed. Let's just say that it was a considerable amount. But enough about the senators. I was much more interested in the second kind of blokes let in. After all, I was one of them. Needless to say, those were the GAR representatives, made up by Valentra and myself. We had arrived escorted by teams of clones who were pointedly heavily armed and armored. That stunt, which was liable to piss off many Jedi, would have an impact on the public, which saw us thanks to the running cameras floating around. They would reach their own conclusions. If someone had failed to figure it out, the trial had many purposes, with Mace's prosecution about the actual laws he might or might not had broken being rather down the priority list. First, it was a publicity stunt. That was obvious to the most of the civilized galaxy. Second, the Jedi Council had to make a political decision, a monumental one, which one way or another would change the order. Ironically, no matter what they did, this trial could easily lead to fracturing within their ranks that might be impossible to mend, even without Palpy and me acting according to our own agendas. But I digress. I am a Sith, a well-known one whose, let's say, religion was becoming something of a public secret, at best. At worst, everyone and their third cousin, twice removed, knew it. Even if technically I wasn't from the type of Sith who were outlawed in the legal nightmare that were the Republic's law books. So as far as the Jedi should be concerned, I should be the enemy they had trained to fight for the last 1,000 years, right? That was the snag. I was also a well-known person who was even rather popular with the Republic citizens. A competent general, a war hero to boot, who was being called the savior of Ryloth lately. One wouldn't be surprised to know that after the last few months of the war, I was better liked and respected than but a handful of Jedi. As important was the fact that a lot of the surviving crop of senators believed that my intervention during the Senate siege was the only reason they were still in one piece. More or less. Then there was Mace Windu, a great bloke who had managed to piss off the whole GAR, a bad thing in the current political climate. During the massive CIS offensive that came perilously close to winning the war for the bastards, everyone important knew that it was only thanks to the tremendous sacrifices of the armed forces, both clones and ordinary people alike, that the line was held and the Republic was still in the game. So right now the GAR was getting everything we wanted, and then some more. To say that the Jedi Council was under tremendous pressure to just throw Windu under the Airbus and wash their hands of him was a hilarious understatement. Amusingly enough, they would have done just that under different circumstances. Nevertheless, there was one snag with that course of action. Doing so would be admitting to themselves that I wasn't the evil Sith TM out to conquer the galaxy, slaughter the Jedi, and corrupt everyone in sight, and not necessary in that order, which would piss off the conservative fraction of the Order who were supporting Windu while believing that I must be stopped at all cost. To make things worse for the Council, that was not an insignificant number of the Jedi at large. The only reason I hadn't had more confrontations like that with Windu was that the Jedi were spread thin across the galaxy. On the other hand, there was an increasing and influential minority of men and women within the Order who were at least neutral towards me, if not downright friendly. Obi-Wan, Shakti, Alaya Sakura, Plo Koon, just to name a few. Not to mention their own chosen one, to whom I was slowly becoming a mentor. RK, equal sign. The doors of the council chambers slid open again, halting my train of thought. Master Yoda slowly walked in, followed by the towering figure of Ki-Adi-Mundi. The Grandmaster's cane was clattering ominously on the metal floor in step with his ponderous gait. Once the tiny Jedi Master made his way to his chair, he sat down and looked around. His eyes stopped on Valentra and me for a moment, and he hummed with something that resembled disappointment. He obviously wasn't amused by the stunt we pulled out with our heavy guard detail. Yoda pointedly paid no attention to the cameras floating around like a bunch of overgrown insects and started speaking in a calm, almost bored tone. Gathered today we are one of our own to judge. He came straight to the point without wasting any time. Mace Windu brought in will be, Yoda ordered. Moments later the doors hissed open again, revealing two faceless masks. They belonged to a pair of temple guardians, escorting the Jedi Master in. Windu strode in, clad in simple brow robes. I would give him that, he had an aura of power around him. To the ordinary spectator, he would appear sure in the outcome of the trial. There was no sign of worry or apprehension in the way he was carrying himself. As if he wasn't the one on trial today. Perhaps it was an act, or he simply believed strongly enough in his cause, knowing deep within his heart that it was a just one, the right one. When Mace was in the center of the chamber, surrounded by a quartet of guards, the show really started. Mace Windu, you stand accused of grave misconduct. Ki-Adi-Mundi started speaking. Unbecoming of one bearing the rank of Jedi Master. Despite their steel discipline, the clones surrounding Valentra and myself stirred. To the left, my fellow general scowled. Meanwhile, the Jedi Masters were giving each other cryptic looks. And attempted treason, Plo Koon added in a rasping voice. I could sense the surrounding clones calming down, glad that the Jedi, who still were the bulk of their highest-ranking commanding officers, didn't just betray them out of hand by ignoring Windu's near treason. As for myself, I had to suppress a grin. The game was finally afoot. How do you plead? Asked Kenobi. Obi-Wan looked calm, almost serene, the epitome of a Jedi Master. However, for someone who actually knew the man, like myself, it was obviously that he was on edge. Kenobi knew better than most what was at stake during this trial. Windu looked each of the Jedi Masters in the eyes for few moments. If doing my duty, protecting the citizens of the Republic and my fellow Jedi from the very threat this order was formed to combat, is counted as treason today, then I plead guilty. Mace's voice thundered around the chamber. Suddenly it was quiet. Deafeningly so, the force was shifting wildly around us like a nervous animal. It was biding its time, waiting. It was a whisper, almost beyond one's capacity to hear. It was a promise for boundless possibilities. And it was all centered around Mace Windu. I blinked, my eyes widening in understanding, something mirrored by some Jedi Masters. In this force-saturated place, we were able to perceive the edge of an ability one must be born with. A gift Mace had. We were sensing the outer edges of a shatterpoint. One concentrated on the trial we were participating in. Windu could see it, perceive its very nature in a way none of us ever could. He could influence it, and the accused Jedi Master was doing it right now. Tell me, my friends, since when is it a crime to arrest a Sith? Since when is forbidden to do one's best to stop an enemy in our very midst who is subtly gaining more and more power? More than a third of the Jedi Masters were nodding in unison with his words, clearly agreeing. Another group, almost as numerous, were displeased by what he was saying. The two main camps within the Jedi Order were revealed within seconds of the trial's start. It was also clear that the outcome, whatever it was going to be, would be decided by those who were more or less neutral on the issue. Just as I knew it would be the case. This enemy you speak of, a human Jedi Master I was unfamiliar with asked. Windu turned his head towards me. I could see a gleam of triumph in his eyes. He pointed an accusing finger at my chest. Darth Delcatar Vale, a Dark Lord of the Sith. one who had wormed his way into the very heart of the Republic armed forces, a position where he could cause untold harm once he shows his true colors for everyone to see. Indeed, I asked, raising an inquisitive eyebrow his way. I was pleased to feel that the clones present in the room bristled at the accusation. I looked the Jedi Master straight in the eyes, and that was a mistake. There was a tremor in the Force. It shook me, nearly throwing me flat on my back. =RK =. To be Mace Windu at that moment was akin to being a rock amidst angry white rapids, a redoubt in the center of monstrous storm. The Jedi Master was beginning to comprehend that his attempt to influence the Shatterpoint that was his trial might have been a mistake. Somehow he was able to perceive glimpses of myriad futures, all passing by like speeding starships, all too fast to properly perceive. Some lighter, yet he sensed that the majority were much darker than the present he existed in. Mace frowned. His ability to interact with Shatterpoints wasn't supposed to work like that, at least in his experience. After all, he wasn't so arrogant as to assume that he knew everything about that skill. Then he felt a presence, an inhuman one, vast and powerful beyond belief. Somehow he had gained its attention. Windu felt amusement, followed by a brief spell of clarity in the jumbled train of visions he was experiencing. He saw a hunched figure, cloaked by heavy black robes, sitting on a throne engulfed by shadows. One that was possibly the most powerful Force user he had ever sensed, and that one was definitely not an adherent of the light side. Then the image jumped again. Windu was floating within crimson void, thick like a sticky syrup. It took him moments to comprehend that he was within someone's rage-given form and substance. He could barely perceive a monstrous helmet made of black gleaming metal, before being engulfed by malevolence, pain, hatred, and regret, mixed in a potent and deadly cocktail by someone fallen to the dark side. Yet there was something familiar in the Force signature associated in that vision. The Jedi Master just knew it was about someone he knew for years or more. However, he simply couldn't place a name to his feelings. The Force signature of that person was simply that distorted, or cloaked by the entity allowing him to see a glimpse of a possible future. Another shift. He was floating over the temple's great hall, which was filled with fire, smoke, and the screams of the dying. His fellow Jedi were locked in mortal combat with tidal wave of white-armored figures. While the knights and Padawans he could see gave an excellent account of themselves, they were buried under a legion of clones who had brought enough firepower to overwhelm their adversaries by sheer volume of fire, if nothing else. Then he was amidst a lava-covered wasteland, where Obi-Wan was fighting a shadow wielding azure lightsaber. A fallen Jedi or a Sith, Mace didn't know. He blinked and was within the Senate chambers, just in time to see a tired and much older-looking Master Yoda jump away from a senatorial pod hurling his way. The Varpad Master was brought down to his knees by the death screams of thousands of Jedi. He was shocked with emotion, and finally he knew what he was allowed to see. A future. The future that would have been if Vale hadn't existed. The fall of both the Jedi and the Republic. Now what? Mace wondered in his mind. He looked at Vale, who was watching him through narrowed eyes, just like the rest of the Force adepts in the council chambers. Someone was speaking, but Windu didn't hear him, being too deep in his own thoughts. He knew a terrible truth now. Without the changes Vale brought, the Jedi would be all but annihilated in the future, and the clones would play a part in that. Now there wasn't a clear path to the future. Everything was in flux, changing too fast to glimpse anything beyond vague traces of danger. Yet Mace couldn't help but wonder whether the fate Vale had in mind for the Jedi was better or worse than the fall he was just warned about. He stood up and turned towards Yoda. Mace Windu had a decision to make. 48, Chapter 18, Art 2. Phase 18, Political Maneuvers. =RK=, Part 2, Council Chambers, Jedi Temple, Coruscant. I don't really know how I stopped myself from tearing into that criffing prick Windu when it became obvious what the bastard was trying to do. Sheer incredulity was part of it for sure. It has been ages since I encountered someone who actually could influence Shatterpoints. And I had no bloody idea that Windu was one of those people. Second, the episode was over as fast as it began, obviously in failure. We all could feel a wave of backslash passing through the Varpad Master, which served him right. How the damned Jedi thought that he could get away with it if he had actually succeeded is beyond me. Not with a lot of the counselors present in the flesh. Unless they liked the outcome and decided to cover it up. Needless to say, my opinion of the Jedi, whose only reaction was to give Windu a bunch of disapproving glares, didn't endear them to me. Master Windu, I hissed through clenched teeth, in the future keep your Force abilities to yourself. Indeed, rumbled Yoda, who narrowed his eyes at the accused. More of that, have we will not? The Grandmaster ordered in a tone of voice I had never heard him use in the movies, though it wasn't that surprising given that this was the real thing after all. Around me, both Valentra and the clones stiffened. While they could only guess what had just happened, the very idea that Windu could have used his sorcery on such an occasion was pissing them off. The way my men tightened their grip on their weapons was telling. Windu looked around with a pained expression on his face. The coiled cloud of tension that had descended over the council chambers with his entrance tightened even move as he opened his mouth to speak. To my and a lot of other people's surprise, Windu proved that he was a Jedi Master and a council member for a reason. My fellow Jedi, it appears that I've lost my way as of late. He spoke in a voice dripping genuine regret, which was actually something I didn't expect from my brief acquaintance with the man. In my perhaps overzealous pursuit to protect all we hold dear, I came close to tearing apart the very republic we are sworn to protect. That was almost as clear an admission of guilt as one could have expected. The Jedi around us stared at their colleague, wondering where he was going. So did I. While I can't help but wonder what future lies ahead of the Republic with a Sith at the helm of its armies, one fact remains unchanged. So far, all of General Vale's actions had been for what he sees as the best of our nation. Oh boy, wasn't this a nice ambiguous speech? While not said, it was implied that my vision for the Republic's future might not be to the liking of either the Jedi as a whole or the power brokers actually running the whole corrupt mess. He was right about that, but that's another story. At the time, I took what I believed to be the right course of action for us all. That's all I have to say for myself. I leave myself to the fair judgment of this council. Windu finished his short speech with a deep bow in Yoda's direction. All eyes turned towards the Grandmaster. The ball was in his court. =RK, equal sign. Shakti felt like massaging her forehead. The abrupt change of tune that Mace has after toying with his Force-given abilities was going to create more problems than it would solve. But more importantly, unless she was very much mistaken, Windu had glimpsed something during his ill-advised attempt to influence the future in his own favor. While he still implied that Vale was at least a potential danger, a person from whom both the Jedi and the Republic as a whole should be wary of. For at least some, the Jedi Master's words would be viewed like an endorsement for Del Qatar. In just few short sentences, Windu had poured fuel on the flames of both Vale's supporters and the hardliners who viewed him as the greatest threat to the future. Though in the end, Shakti knew that unfortunately, most beings would hear whatever they wanted to in Mace's words. T stole a brief glance Del Qatar's way, seeing him scowl at Windu. She felt relieved that Vale didn't attack her fellow Jedi Master when Mace criffed up with his Force abilities. It wasn't like the Sith wasn't provoked if the way he had reacted was anything to judge by. Such a disaster didn't bear thinking about, though the usually suppressed part of her that was the evolved predator couldn't help but wonder who would have won if those two went toe-to-toe against each other. At those thoughts, she had to consciously prevent a quiet growl of anticipation from escaping her lips. =RK, equal sign. Master Yoda had a dilemma to solve, all because Mace had decided to act like a blithering imbecile. The ancient Jedi Master was sorely tempted to use his cane on the much taller human's shins. Criffing kids these days, he haven't been in such a mess in centuries. A quiet rumble escaped Yoda's lungs. Difficult it is. Served faithfully the Republic you have. He used his cane to point at Windu's chest. Many conflicts resolved you have. Many lives saved you have. Yoda's ears drooped in a sign of regret while he wondered why the younglings like Mace just had to act so rash. Yet, The Grand Master trailed off, glancing from Vale to Windu. Yoda was well aware of all facets of this trial, of all the hopes riding on it, all the expectations, and the incredible potential for disaster. Worst of all, no matter what one might have expected, his hands were mostly tied. It wasn't right, yet the trial wasn't about justice or guilt, though there was plenty of both to go around. No, it was about both Jedi and Republic politics. There was a schism within his own order, one Yoda didn't see coming when he had decided that Vale wasn't their enemy. And he should have. After all, Yoda had been the one to train the Jedi, the one who shaped the Order for more centuries than he wanted to count, only to be blindsided by an impossibility. A Sith that may not be an enemy, a logical impasse which was undermining the foundation of the current Jedi Order. Yoda closed his eyes, opening himself to the Force, searching for guidance. Even if he already knew the path he should take, he needed to buy time and try to heal the rift in his own house. Guilty you are of arrogance, short-sightedness. Your actions, befitting a Jedi Master's, were not. Part of this council no longer you are. Yoda sharply waved a hand when some Jedi Masters whispered furiously at that turn of events. For Yoda wasn't calling a vote, he was commanding, something he usually avoided. Punishment enough this is not. However, in a war we are. Leaving you in prison a waste of your talents would be. Until concluded the Clone Wars are, a common soldier for the Republic you will be. Plo Koon gave a firm nod. So your guilt will be redeemed in service of the Republic. Windu answered with a single nod. This show is over, Kenobi announced after a subtle gesture by Yoda. The Temple Guardians wasted no time in ushering the camera drones out before leaving with Windu. =RK, =. I kept quiet until the chamber's doors sealed behind the last of the guards. Then I looked straight at Yoda. You very well know that letting him go with just a slap on the wrist will be unacceptable, I said. Next to me, Valentra glared at the tiny Jedi. We surely could reach some kind of compromise. Padme hurried to intervene. I'm not sure how much she was aware of the inter-council and Jedi politics in general, though it should be obvious to someone as experienced in the field of politics that this trial had to be resolved. Now. Know this, I do, Yoda said, his ears drooping in what I thought was a sign of regret. Get your wish, you will. All Jedi officers screened will be. Lacking the skills for command who are removed from their positions will be. Valentra glanced my way and I gave him a nod. That will be acceptable for the Army and Navy. Won't such an act be very disruptive? Asked Bale. It was a good question. It will. However, in the long term, we will be much better for it. There were many instances so far that Jedi officers of all levels made critical mistakes, both tactical and strategic. That's not something that we could allow continuing. Some Jedi Masters looked like they approved. Others were unreadable. However, the glare sent our way by about a third of the council was enough to give me a good idea what they thought of our agreement. In the end, they kept their mouths shut, deciding that enough of the Jedi's dirty laundry had been flashed in public for the time being. Though I just knew those folks would be a pain in my arse in due time. Well, now that's settled, you all know what follows. I smirked, letting some of my amusement show. After all, the trial's outcome was something I was going to spin my way while giving the Jedi enough rope to hang themselves. A meeting with our friends of the media, Kenobi grunted. Inevitable it is, muttered Yoda, in a tone making it clear to us all that he wasn't looking forward to the meet and greet with the vultures. The two senators in our midst looked at each other, wondering what the problem with meeting the media was. After all, that was something both of them had to do often enough. =RK, the Great Hall, Jedi Temple, Coruscant. We made our way to the temple's gates, where a small mob of reporters awaited us. That part of the galaxy's scum was kept at bay by a cordon of clone troopers and temple guardians. I didn't need the Force to know that the security forces' tempers were already fraying while they were trying to contain the newsies. I put my best fake smile on my face and strode forward. Valentra moved to my right, schooling his face in a mask of calmness. We let the majority of the Jedi Masters in our wake, while they were striding slowly forward, refusing to show themselves as anything but dignified. Well, except Shakti and Obi-Wan, who hurried ahead of their fellows to join us. To be fair, I wasn't really sure if it was a sign of support or if they wanted to be near in order to mitigate any damage the inevitable interviews were about to cause. I nodded at the clone lieutenant commanding the trooper detachment at the gates, and as was pre-arranged, he ordered his soldiers to make way. It took Kenobi's sharp order and T's glare to have the same effect on the Guardians, something that didn't remain unnoticed. I made my way to the head of the mob and grinned at them. My friends, undoubtedly you have some pointed questions for both ourselves. I tilted my head at my fellow general, and the wise Jedi Masters of the Council, please go ahead. As expected, what followed was a cacophony of shouted questions. I waited for a few moments before raising a hand. It took them some more time, but they quieted, managing to get to a semblance of order before the rest of the council could join us, thus showing better control than I expected from damn reporters. Let's start with you, miss. I pointed at a pleasant-looking human woman who reminded me of that reporter from the third Mass Effect game. Tanny Lawn from Galactic Press. General Vale, our viewers would like to know the Army's position on the Council's decision. Further, some of them have concerns about a Sith being the nominal head of the Republic's field forces in these dark times. Miss Lawn, first, I can assure you that the Sith I associated with all those years ago are nothing like those you are most familiar with. I'm speaking of the same so-called Sith who were outlawed during the Ruusan reformations, the same Sith who are in league with the Confederacy of Independent Systems in their dastardly scheme to plunge the whole galaxy into war. I paused for a moment to let my words sink in and better judge the emotions of the small crowd. There was curiosity, anticipation, a lot of cynicism, as one would expect from reporters, and not a small amount of fear after all that had happened. At least those were the strongest feelings of the gathered beings before me. It was something I could work with. What some of my detractors whisper in the dark is true. I let those words hang in the air. The pause was just enough for Padme and Organa to join us, shortly followed by the rest of the councillors present on Coruscant. During the Great War, I fought for the Empire. In that conflict, I killed both Jedi and Republic soldiers. However, that war has been over for a long time. The very Empire I served, the Republic that was its arch-enemy, and even the Jedi Order have been gone for millennia. The Republic I now serve is the legitimate galactic government. I paused for effect. In all the years I've lived, one thing hasn't changed. I still continue to fight for imposing order and stability onto the galaxy at large, just as the Grand Army and this very Republic does. Even as we speak, both clones and ordinary people alike bleed and die for this same ideal. I waved a hand, encompassing both Valentra and the clones escorting us. We will do our best to ensure that this conflict is fought to its conclusion with the least amount of bloodshed and collateral damage. However, the individuals who lead the other side, those so-called Sith and their allies amongst the Separatist Council, have shown their true colors. That of terrorists, delusional warmongers, mass murderers who target military and civilian alike. I took a deep breath. We, your proud guardians, from all branches of the Republic military forces, will do whatever it takes to stop the chaos and madness unleashed by this so-called Confederacy. We will bring the war criminals, leading the CIS to justice, stopping their atrocities across the galaxy once and for all, I declared. To my surprise, the small crowd exploded with cheers, taking me aback. I stood there basking in their raw emotions. It was bloody glorious. Next to me, the Jedi stood rooted in their places, not knowing how to react. Few of them were in such a position before, and the raw feelings of the gathered reporters were rocking their world. I raised a hand again, waiting for the people in front of me to calm down. As for your other question, I looked the young reporter in the eyes. The Army agrees that given the circumstances, simply imprisoning the former Jedi Master Windu and throwing the key away would be a waste. No matter his other faults, he is a competent warrior, one who can be put to good use in defending the Republic in her hour of need. Nevertheless, he is not someone who we feel could be trusted. So how to best to utilize his skills will be the topic of some debates. I paused. Thank you for your insightful questions, Miss Lawn. I pointed at a deep blue, male Twi'lek next. Let's hear your questions, sir. Dan Houtenstein, Coruscant News Network. General Vale, despite the successful military operations you led as of late, the Republic as a whole is seen as being on the defensive. What's more concerning, some of our military analysts say that we are at severe strategic disadvantage, something that allowed the attacks on Coruscant to happen in the first place. How would you comment on that? Actually, that is a very good question, Dan, I said in a serious tone. It was time to pour even more fuel on the fire of anti-CIS resentment and fear. I'm about to tell you a secret that few outside the military know. It has been something that has given those of us in the know a lot of sleepless nights. That got everyone's undivided attention. The reporters were looking at me with hunger in their eyes. After all, it wasn't often that an official was about to tell them a deep, dark secret. Officially, in front of the whole galaxy, I found it hard to keep the serious expression on my face. I had them now. Even better, this was one of the things we discussed in the meeting with the intelligence chiefs. It was decided that I would be the one to confirm the bad news to the citizens at large. It is no real secret that when this war started, the Republic as a whole didn't have a real army to speak of. Just some judicial forces, which while good in their role, were law enforcement units. The same could be said for the Jedi as well. They are excellent in their role, that of peacekeepers and fiendishly good investigators. The fact that they are some of the galaxy's premier warriors helps as well. Some Jedi stood a bit straighter at the unexpected praise, while others, the more experienced and cunning of them, or simply paranoid, waited for the other shoe to drop. The newsies, on the other hand, were lapping up my words as if there was no tomorrow. However, both groups had some major disadvantage. The most glaring of all is their startling lack of numbers. No matter how good you are, when the enemy could simply bury you in numbers without even notice, well, I shrugged. I didn't need to extrapolate on that front. Both groups combined didn't have anything approaching the numbers to face an army. Second, which is as important, pertains to a lot of Jedi. Luckily to us all, that was a problem to which we found a solution, which will be announced today. The crowd was becoming restless again. As expected, teasing them with juicy information was working. That problem is simple, yet complex. The mentality in which the Jedi are raised and encouraged to have, well, it's contrary to what one needs to be an effective military officer. There aren't many who are able to raise above what they were taught all their lives behind the temple's walls and become the officers that the Republic needs in her hour of need. That's why the GAR High Command and the Jedi Council reached an agreement. The performance of all Jedi already included within the army structure will be reviewed. Those unsuitable for command positions will be replaced with beings who would find no conflict in executing their duty with their religious beliefs and ideals. I gave a respectful bow to the gathered Jedi counselors. Most of them managed to keep their calm facade, though there were a lot who were glaring at me. The fun thing was that everything I said was factually true. Yet, for one who was unfamiliar or had vague knowledge about the Force, well, they would make their own conclusions about the Jedi and the way the war was prosecuted under their command. While there were a lot of questions shouted my way, I wasn't finished. I raised my right hand in a placating gesture, waiting for an opportunity to speak again. When the crowd calmed down a bit at my latest revelation, I was free to continue. Nevertheless, that's not all there is to our current problems. While the Republic is much bigger than what the traitors hold, with much greater potential economics, we do face some significant problems. To put it bluntly, when the war started, they were ready. Their economy was already on war footing, their shipyards and factories engaged producing warships, weapons, and hordes of droids. While we were caught with our pants down, I waved a hand in a dismissive gesture. I understand it. Really. No one sane wishes a war. Those of us who truly know it are the last ones who would desire it. We have seen the horrors, we carry the scars, and we have lost too much to it to willingly embrace it. Unless that we knew that sometimes the alternative is worse. And/or we are Sith, but that's beside the point. So I can't place all, or even most of the blame, on those senators who simply wished for peace and opposed the raising of the Grand Army of the Republic. However, now we all find ourselves with a problem. Until the economy can be placed on a war footing, we will be at a severe disadvantage against the CIS. The next few months will be precarious, even if the latest enemy offensive has run out of steam. Now it is a race between our boys and girls, fighting across half the galaxy, trying to stem the tide of evil and buy us enough time to place our house in order and start diminishing the Separatists' advantage. I looked straight at one of the camera drones floating in front of me. While it is a dauntless task, it is far from an insurmountable one. For we don't stand alone. Many of our friends have come to the Republic's aid in our hour of need. Even now, Corellian ships and crews race to bolster the Navy in a dozen sectors. That is something that we should be grateful for. Instead of choosing the easy way, instead of simply standing aside while the Republic and the whole galaxy is torn apart in war, the Corellians chose to do the right thing, to risk life and limb to oppose the genocidal madness of the CIS. And that, my fellow beings, is something that should both humble us and make us forever grateful for their example. =RK=. That interview was going to have major consequences across the galaxy, for both the beings who were present there in person and the masses who watched it on the holonet. Ki Adimundi carefully studied the gathered reporters while the various beings were wildly cheering Vale. He couldn't help but wonder if this was a foreshadowing of things to come. The general was an increasingly popular man, one who was on his way to becoming indispensable for a republic struggling with enemies from both outside and within. And democracy seldom was able to coexist with indispensable beings around. =RK. Nearby, Shakti had trouble keeping her head clear. She was starting to understand why all the Sith were building empires in the past. This was a small crowd, yet the effect of those people's emotions was staggering. T wondered how she would feel if faced with tens of thousands or even more beings. And what a Sith could do with such a crowd. The Togruta knew that she should be, well, scared isn't the right word, concerned about the potential nefarious plots that might lurk within Vale's head. But she couldn't help it. She was both scared and thrilled at the thought of what he could achieve when playing with such a crowd. She shook her head at those un-Jedi-like thoughts. Shakti needed to meditate and clear up her head. The shots across the bow that Vael sent as a warning towards the council were going to give her additional headaches. She just knew it. =RK=. Temporarily Chancellor Office, location classified, Coruscant. The Republic's Chancellor watched the proceedings with a frown on his face. His estimate of the threat that Vale represented was revisited once again. Upwards. However, that wasn't his priority right now. He had to find a way to keep the bulk of the Jedi on the front lines because he was sure that after Vale cleaned house, many if not most of those weak fools would be kicked out of their cushy positions of authority, which of course would create some interesting opportunities for the Dark Lord of the Sith, even if it meant that executing the original plan when the time came probably wouldn't be as effective as envisioned. No matter. It wasn't like he couldn't change and adapt when the situation called for it. After all, he wasn't a fossilized Jedi. =RK=. Far away, the different members of the Confederacy Council winced while watching Vale speak. The politicians amongst them found most disturbing the fact that their newest enemy apparently could easily win the reporters on his side. Those and their networks were the ones shaping the opinions of the whole galaxy. It did not bode well when that infernal Sith could whip up a bunch of reporters into such a frenzy. One had to wonder what he could do with the ordinary citizens, something that soon everyone would know once the news had some time to be absorbed by the Republic's and to a much lesser extent the CIS's population. When all things were considered, those beings running the CIS were grateful that they still had a strategic advantage over the Republic. And last but not the least, the few beings who were the leaders of a rogue organization within both the Republic and the CIS itself were planning how to use the latest upheaval within their adversaries to the best of their advantage. 49, Chapter 18, Part 3. Phase 18, Political Maneuvers. =RK=. Part 3, Senator Amidala's Suite, Republica 500, Coruscant. I can honestly say that spending my last evening on Coruscant here before leaving for Corellia wasn't something that I expected, especially being amongst such pleasant company. The place was Padme's relatively small dining room, As for the company, well, there was Anakin as one might expect, and Shakti. After the press conference, she had been once again assigned as my shadow. What amongst what I said could have prompted such a reaction among the Jedi, I wonder? I rhetorically asked myself. Shakti, who was sitting across the table from me, snorted. She spoke as if reading my thoughts. You all but called most Jedi incompetent, made many of us look like a bunch of crazy zealots, and insinuated that you would be replacing us with a bunch of bloodthirsty maniacs in charge of the clones. What's there to be nervous about? Obviously, the time for small talk was over. A pity. I was enjoying the story Padme was telling us about Anakin's antics on their flight from Coruscant towards Naboo during the Trade Federation crisis. Her words just highlighted one of the biggest problems I had with the Jedi. From my and most objective people's perspective, what she said was true. The Jedi, at least most of them, were incompetent as far as being military officers goes. As for bloodthirsty replacements, that would be true only from the Jedi's perspective. For them, most effective military commanders would probably be considered a bunch of murderous maniacs. To be fair, Master T, Windu made a great example for most of the points you raised. Anakin snorted. Further, Delcatar is right. Most of us are unfit for being generals, he muttered quietly. It was obvious that Skywalker was remembering his and Obi-Wan's escapades on Ryloth. How so? Asked T. You are speaking from experience, she declared after studying him for a few moments. Yeah. What happened? She asked. I want to know that too. Padme added her 2 cents, sending a pointed look at her husband and then to the living room, where I had noticed a couch. And you, she pointed at me with her fork, I can definitely say that the way you got your version of the story out first was very good. For a politician, as one of the leaders of the army, you should know better than to play such games. It is the Senate's job to deal with the press and the politics of the situation. There isn't much of the Senate left, Padme. Besides, if I'm to be honest, I wouldn't trust most of your colleagues with anything of importance. I turned my head towards Anakin. While she had grown up a lot in the short time I knew her, she could still be naive sometimes. You know, Dooku was right when he spoke with Kenobi on Geonosis. Skywalker gave me an empty look. I have no idea what you are talking about. Ah, perhaps you know what I imply? I turned my attention towards Shakti, who shook her head in denial. Her hypnotizing eyes were looking at me with interest. He told Obi-Wan that the Senate and the Republic as a whole were under the influence of a Sith Lord. And he didn't mean me. So Dooku tried to gain Kenobi as an asset for the CIS by lying to him. It obviously failed. Obviously. However, you are mistaken about one point. Dooku told the truth, I declared, and watched with amusement the effects of the bomb I just dropped in their collective laps. It wouldn't be the last for the night either. Even if you are correct, I just can't take your word for that, not without evidence, declared Padme. To my pleasant surprise, the one who asked the most important question was none other than Shakti. It is a grave accusation, one I can't dismiss out of hand considering how the Senate has been behaving. Though most of those suspicious instances could be written off as simple greed and corruption. She fixed me with a stare. Why are you telling this to the three of us? Such suspicions would be better served if brought to either the Jedi Council or your friend Valentra. Hey, I am a senator. This is need-to-know information for me too, Padme exclaimed. Yet Master T raises a good point. Care to enlighten us? 3 pair of eyes converged on me. I leaned back into my chair. It was time to start laying the foundation of the future. You need allies. Shakti trailed off. I have my reasons to want you all on my side. I looked at Padme. You are one of the youngest, yet most influential senators in the Republic. A woman of integrity who stands by her ideals when the going gets tough. Which is something to admire, though sometimes the consequences of your stubbornness could be to the detriment of us all. You and Anakin are never going to let my stand against the Republic Army bill go, will you? Padme grumbled. Not anytime soon, I muttered. To his credit, Anakin remained silent. The young man obviously didn't want to sleep on the couch again. Padme, you are a staunch advocate of democracy and freedom of choice, something that will be missing from this galaxy if the CIS or my hypothetical Sith backing them win. Fair enough, she said. It was no secret that there was a conspicuous lack of democracy after the Separatists seized a world, or within their own camp if the rumors we got from intelligence had any merit to them. You, my young friend, I pointed at Anakin, will do anything to protect those precious to you, something that the Jedi did little to help you with in the past. Besides, to those that still believe in such nonsense as prophecies, you are the chosen one in addition to being a powerful Force adept, and a talented amateur as far as commanding troops goes. He gave me a stubborn look, but then shook his head. The reminder of what happened with his mother not too long ago was still painful. I could clearly sense his anguish at the reminder. So could Shakti, but she chose to remain silent until she knew more about the situation she suddenly found herself in. "And what about me, O wise one?" Shakti asked. "You are one of the best that the Jedi have, an experienced leader, a virtuoso with a lightsaber, and most importantly, someone who no longer takes the Council's propaganda for holy scripture that must be followed at all costs." That she was quite pleasant to the eyes was something I didn't add aloud. It wasn't something she would appreciate right now, though that thought made a concern resurface in my mind. Was I thinking with my dick as far as Ty was concerned? Well, no matter. Right now was too late for second thoughts. I had made up my mind, and it was high time to start recruiting some high-profile people to my side. Or shoot myself in the foot if I had misjudged those three. I have a vision for the future that I want to accomplish. Imagine a galaxy that is stable, a beacon of law and order, a place that no longer strains under the wasteful chaos of this war. I want a peaceful galaxy, one where you won't have to fear the ambitions of petty warlords, a place without rampant crime, a galaxy free of slavery, no matter if you are fortunate to live within the heart of the Republic or you are from a Force-forsaken world in the Outer Rim. I took a deep breath. That is my dream. And with your help, I might be able to pull it off. My little speech got Anakin's attention at least. It was enough to mention that I wanted to get rid of slavery for good, and he was almost guaranteed to have my back. Besides, straightening up the galaxy was something that he would agree with. Oh my, that's a lot to take in. You sure are ambitious, Del Qatar. I can't help but wonder, while those are pretty words you say, do you really mean them? Asked Shakti. Words are cheap. I would like you all to judge me by my actions. Yet your path is one of carnage, supplied Padme. You can't change the galaxy with only your ideals. More often than not, it takes someone willing to dirty their hands. Do you think that the Hutts will stop their criminal enterprises or rein in their slavers if you ask nicely or force some kind of economic sanctions upon them? No, Anakin growled. I know those beings, he hissed, remembering his life as a slave. There is only one language they understand. Unless you are willing and able to enforce your terms, nothing will change. For the longest time, a big part of the Outer Rim has been a hellhole, and yet neither the Republic nor the Jedi have done a thing to clean up that mess. It is something that should have been dealt with centuries ago. Shakti shook her head in resignation. Anakin, you know that isn't the Jedi way. We are diplomats and peacekeepers. For all the good it did, he muttered. Oh, Annie, Padme whispered, in a way one wouldn't speak to just a friend. Anakin looked at his wife, his funk forgotten, something that didn't remain unnoticed by Shakti. She was glancing from Anakin to Padme. I gave the three of them a wan smile. It was time to drop the hammer. Anakin, I believe that you, as well as many of the other Jedi, are aware that I consider you a friend, right? I asked lightly. Skywalker tore his eyes from the stunning image that was his wife. It's truly amazing what some makeup could accomplish, and glanced at me. The change of topic had surprised him. By the way he shifted his posture, I could gather that he had considerably calmed himself. I think it's safe to say you are correct in that assessment. You aren't one to ask questions you know the answer to, unless you want to make a point, Senator Amidala stated while her husband was still regaining his cool. I think Padme got it, I said. The senator had paled a bit. She had a grim expression on her face. Padme, what is it? Skywalker asked. His tone was full with concern. I should have thought of that after today's interviews, even earlier, though today would make it certain. She gave me a cross look. You said it plainly for everyone in the galaxy to hear that you are a Sith. So? Anakin shrugged. It was a public secret anyway. Besides, it's far from being the most memorable thing he said anyway. That's my point, combined with the contents of your speech, that will bring even more scrutiny upon you. And upon your friends. She glared at me. Shakti glanced between the secretly married couple. She had been wondering why Anakin had been invited to this dinner in the first place, and I'm sure that she was disturbed by the way those two interacted, even if they tried to keep things professional. Especially if one of them is the chosen one of the Jedi Order, the Togruta said, with a thoughtful frown on her face, an expression which made her look very cute. I simply beamed at her. Say what you will about Skywalker, but he could be fast on the uptake when he wanted. He deflated and looked dejectedly at his half-eaten food. It won't be long now, even without practically announcing it to a Jedi Master. He pointed an accusing finger at my chest. Guilty as charged, Anakin. However, there is a method to my madness. I leaned towards him and mock-whispered, just loud enough for the women to hear. It's a test. Those two are in a relationship. Shakti grumbled. She glared at each one of us in turn before taking a deep pull from the cup of Naboo wine in front of her. In hindsight, it should have been obvious. How long? A few weeks? Longer? The husband and wife looked at each other, conversing with but a glance. We finally admitted our feelings on Geonosis, Anakin said, and we married soon afterwards, when Annie escorted me back to Naboo after the battle was resolved. Married? Shakti spluttered. Ki adi mundi, I interjected, earning myself a withering glare. Don't give me that, Del-Qatar. You know very well that he is a special case. His species is close to extinction. So, do you really believe that there are no feelings involved between him, his wives, and kids? I asked. He is a Jedi Master. He can control his heart, I interrupted her. Trust me about this, Master T. It doesn't work like that, I know. She was about to argue further, but then abruptly clamped her mouth shut. She gave me a pained look and lowered her head. What you showed me, your wife, she fell for and married a Sith during the war, yet she remained a Jedi up until the bitter end. Yes, she never fell to the dark side, despite reveling in her feelings. Ashara let her emotions run free, and she was stronger for it. I spoke wistfully, remembering times long past. You were married? Skywalker asked. What happened to her? Padme was fast to add her own question. I gave them an empty stare. She was murdered, by the Jedi of my own era. Two simultaneous gasps echoed in the suddenly cold dining room. Shakti winced when I reminded her of my past again. She was looking at her lap, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. 50. Chapter 18, Part 4. Chapter 18, Political Maneuvers. =RK=. Part 4, Padme's apartment. 500 Republica, Coruscant. Del-Qatar's latest revelation stopped the conversation cold. While both Anakin and Senator Amidala were struggling with the implications of Vale's past, Shakti was trying to figure out what he was aiming for. Unless she was very much mistaken, there was far more to his goals than what he had revealed. Which was a given. After all, Vale hadn't told them anything besides a very general outline for the future he wanted. Then it clicked. The Jedi Order. What was its place? The Jedi's place in the galaxy Del-Qatar wanted to shape. Then again, if Del-Qatar wanted them discredited, or even worse, Windu had given him the perfect opportunity during the first attack on the temple. She looked up, unspoken questions shining in her eyes. Her gaze was met by the Sith's amused expression. What about the Jedi? What about them? He repeated her question. The Jedi will make their own choices and reap the consequences, whatever they may be. All I've done is try to steer your council away from the path that your kind took in my past. =RK=. Meanwhile, Anakin was staring at his wife, while his heart was gripped by fear's cold embrace. It wasn't that long ago that he lost his mother. Shmi died of her wounds in his arms. Because he had been too late, because the Jedi were unsympathetic to his plight, and finally because despite all that power at his fingertips, he had been powerless to save his mother. He'd been unable to heal her, which was another failing of the Jedi. The only thing available to learn had been the healing trance, something that worked only on oneself. In contrast, he was sitting next to living proof that even a criffing Sith could heal better than what was officially available to the Order. What was sealed within the temple's archive out of fear, the knowledge that could have saved his mother, probably gathered dust somewhere in the temple, all but forgotten. That angered Anakin, yet it was far from all that burdened him. Part of him feared the Order's reaction once his marriage became public knowledge. Would they expel him? And demand that he dissolve his marriage? At any rate, it would be a scandal, and a public one at that. While he didn't really care what the effect would be on him, he was exposed to enough politicking to know that Padmé's enemies would try to use their secret marriage against her. All those thoughts ran through Skywalker's head while he struggled with the bomb that Vale dropped in their laps. A part of him wanted to deny it, to believe that the Jedi, no matter from which era, would do such a thing. Yet the darker part of his personality, which was born from his childhood in slavery, knew better. He hadn't been innocent for as long as he could remember, knowing very well the evil men did. That cynical part of Anakin Skywalker could very well see it. A raid to either capture Vale's wife to rescue her from the corrupting influence of the Sith. An attack meant to get Vale himself, which found his wife instead. An attempt to kidnap her in order to blackmail an enemy leader. It could have been any one of these scenarios gone wrong, even before Delcatar told them exactly what had happened. About Ashara possessing the fabled battle meditation, so Anakin could almost understand why the Jedi of that time had gone after Ashara. Though in the end it didn't really matter. Anakin knew that if the roles were reversed, if the CIS somehow managed to get Padmé, which the criffing bastard seemed keen on doing, he would go to the end of the galaxy and beyond to make them pay. And if he somehow traveled to a far future in which the CIS or a successor organization still existed, they would be his enemies too. He would have thought that would be even truer for a Sith. Yet, instead of a vengeance-driven monster, he was dining with a reasonable man, who not only wanted to finally bring order to a galaxy gone mad, but to crush criffing slavery once and for all. So he was torn and confused. What Vale apparently wanted was the same thing Skywalker's heart desired, beyond seeing his angel safe and happy. Yet he couldn't help but wonder what the catch was. RK Padmé, while married to a Jedi and friends with a few others, didn't really grasp the nuances of the Force, especially the differences between the light and dark sides, beyond one being the evil one. That was through no failing of her own, considering the narrow views and understanding possessed by the Jedi of the era. So while she considered the death of Vale's wife a tragedy, she missed most of the implications, both about Delcatar and the Jedi who ordered and took part in the raid. Nevertheless, by extrapolating what she knew of the Order of her time, she could see that act as being out of character, or one born out of desperation, just as she viewed Windu's actions. That's how Padmé Amidala started wondering how far some Jedi would go, while Delcatar's star continued to rise, and he accumulated more and more power. A most disturbing thought as far as all its implications went, both about the Jedi's possible excesses and about what Vale would one day decide to do with his power. After all, she was opposed to even Palpatine, an old and dear friend gaining as much power as he already had, and Vale would come to match him if nothing drastically changed in the near future. While what Delcatar said he wanted sounded great for the galaxy as a whole, Padmé simply couldn't trust him. Not with this, not with that much power. If she had to be honest with herself, she probably wouldn't. Couldn't condone anyone gaining so much power. Yet opposing his agenda, while she wasn't really sure what it truly was, wouldn't be the prudent thing to do. She sighed. The Republic was in shambles, and barring a miracle, the situation would grow a lot worse before it started improving. The last thing the Republic needed was further internal divisions in the face of the CIS. Besides, Padmé didn't have a leg to stand on against Vale. Not when what he said he wanted would be embraced by most, if not all, Republic citizens. She had few appealing choices. In the end, Padmé decided to follow what she knew Anakin would go for. She would stand with Vale for now, to see what his vision for the future really was, and to be ready if he was indeed the power-hungry tyrant his detractors tried to portray him as. At least that way, she might be able to keep Annie on the straight and narrow path. RK. So it comes to this, Shakti thought. Suddenly she was in position to fulfill her mission from the council. She could easily become part of Delkatar's inner circle and learn his plans, so the Jedi could be ready if he was anything but what he posed as. After all, their official position as far as this Sith was concerned was trust but verify. From multiple credible sources. It was a simple thing, really. An agreement, one that was non-binding or anything at least for now. Yet the Togruta couldn't help but feel trapped. Somehow T found herself in a position where no matter what she would choose, she would betray someone's trust. That very thought caught her off guard. Since when did Vale's trust mean anything at all to her? I would like to see this future of yours unfold. Padme broke the silence to everyone's surprise. She smiled frosty. As long as securing this galaxy from the insanity of this war is your goal. That much I can guarantee. I don't want this galaxy torn asunder by conflict, or to crown myself emperor or other such nonsense. Shakti was stunned. As he spoke, Delkatar dropped his shields for an instant. For a moment she could clearly feel Vale through the Force. He was telling the truth. Not even a hint of deception. Then the barriers slammed back in place, and Delkatar was once again a whirlpool of light and dark energies. Shakti briefly considered the possibility that he was trying to manipulate them, but she discarded it. The Force didn't lie. Vale was serious about bringing order and stability to the galaxy without, unlike any Sith she had heard before him, wanting to be the one in charge of everything. Delkatar looked her in the eyes and smiled. I know that despite everything that happened in the short time I've been here, I've yet to earn your trust. So I won't ask you to choose between following my path or the council. I'm aware that they want you to report on my actions, and that's fine with me. I hope that by telling them the truth, you would help convince the more traditional-minded Jedi that I'm not a monster fit to be tied. I see. Shakti trailed off. That was certainly not what she had expected. She was glad that her loyalties wouldn't be tested any further that day. Well, we'll see how your actions speak for themselves. Besides, you'll need someone to keep you out of too much trouble. She smirked at Vale and gave him a toothy grin. When she turned her head towards Skywalker, the young Jedi shrugged. What? He exclaimed, noticing that everyone was looking at him. You know my opinion on slavery. Neither the Republic nor the Jedi did a criffing thing to clean up the Outer Rim. If Delkatar wants to make a difference, I'm behind him 100%. As for the catch, we'll wait and see. Skywalker thought. $RK=$. Well, that's a much better reception than I feared. I gave them a genuine smile. Oh, I was well aware that I had only their tentative support for now. And at least Padme was likely to go along only to see if in the long run I was either an asset or threat to her precious Republic. Needless to say, I was all right with it. Those were just the first steps to binding them to my side. After all, if I wanted them as reliable long-term allies, it would take some time and a lot of effort to convince them that my plans were not only necessary, but something that they should support of their free will. What's your plan? Because what you stated were the end goals, Padme asked. Why, it is simple and obvious. We reform the Republic, I declared. That's certainly a bold statement. Padme gave me a wary look. Oh, I'm aware of that. It will be a painful and rocky process, but stunts like the invasion of Naboo and nothing being done about it. Such things can't be allowed to happen ever again. That's a low blow, Vale, Padme glared at me. That makes it no less true. We need to eradicate the corruption crippling the Senate, and that's something in which you would be invaluable, I flattered her. He's kind of correct, Padme. If this war is to end, we need to solve the problems that caused the creation of the Separatists. A lot of their grievances were genuine, Shakti said. It was pleasant to see that she had her head out of the sand and knew that the Republic as it was one monumental train wreck in progress. Or at least she was starting to suspect it. So how would we theoretically go about fighting the corruption on the higher levels of the Republic's government? I asked the senator. Padme frowned for a time, then she started speaking. $RK=$. Later that night. Primary Republic R&D Complex, Coruscant. A few hours after the dinner was concluded, successfully at least in my opinion, I went to check up on a pair of projects. which would be combat tested during the coming assault on Geonosis. It took me a lot of time to pass through all the now mandatory security checks in order to enter the complex, but I finally reached one of the dark rooms from where I could access the data. Login, Vale, Del Qatar, codename Rogue Knight, password, asterisk, 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 asterisk. Day's code word, purple midnight. Scanning. Voice print confirmed. Retinal scan confirmed. Biometric scan confirmed. DNA scan confirmed. Deep scan concluded. No foreign objects detected. Access granted, General. Voice command input active. Display status of Project Helldiver, I ordered. Accessing databanks. Searching. Data found. Warning. All files pertaining Project Helldiver are classified under codeword Crimson Sonata. Ident Bloody Harvest. Codeword accepted. Displaying files. Project Helldiver. Status, Phase 1, ready for combat trials. Phase 2 on standby pending High Command approval and combat data from Phase 1. How many units will be ready for Geonosis? Phase 1 prototypes approved for limited production run. 1,000 plus /SAT 5% completed units expected in allotted time period. Splendid. Approval for preliminary funding of Phase 2 is granted. Log off Project Helldiver, access Projects Ascension and Rebirth. Accessing data. Warning Project Ascension is protected under codeword Black Dawn. Warning Project Rebirth is protected under codeword Black Sunrise. Ident Shadow Contingency. Ident Last Resort. Codewords accepted. Displaying files. Project Ascension. Status, Phase 2. Complete. Phase 3 is ready for implementation. Selecting volunteers is currently in progress. Estimated time to completion, 2 galactic weeks. Project Rebirth. Phase 1 is in progress. Analysis of gene sequences, 30% complete. Research of genetic modification procedures in progress. Estimated time to completion, NA. Raise priority on Project Ascension. I want the procedures to begin within the week. Log off. Projects. Ascension and Rebirth. Access Project Dragon. Accessing data. Warning Project Dragon is protected under codeword Crimson Tide. Ident Whirlwind. Codeword accepted. Accessing data. Project Dragon. Status, Phase 1. Preliminary design complete. Phase 2. On standby pending completion of projects. Phalanx and Hermes. Good enough. Log off Project Dragon. It's time to catch some shut-eye. Logging you off. Query unclear. Please repeat request.